The first time my daughter called me ma'am, she wasn't angry at me across a kitchen table. She was standing behind a polished bank counter, wearing the blazer I had helped her buy, looking straight through me, as if I were a stranger off the street. I had come in with one folded letter from Cedar Falls Community Bank, the kind that makes your hands shake before you even understand why.
Close the doors!
When I whispered, "Lauren, it's me," she smiled at the customers behind me and said, "Mom, please, wait your turn." But then the bank manager saw my name, went pale, and quietly said, "Close the doors." Now, if this story touches something in you, please like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments how you would feel in my place. Also, comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. My name is Tiffany Sanders, and for 68 years, I believed there were only a few things in this world a woman could count on, without question, the Lord above her, the home she kept clean with her own 2 hands, and the child she carried beneath her heart. By the time I learned how wrong I was about that last one, I was already standing in a bank lobby with my daughter, looking through me like I was nothing but another old woman holding up the line. But before Lauren Whitaker became the kind of woman who could call me ma'am in public, she had once been the little girl who refused to sleep unless I sat beside her bed and rubbed circles on her back. She had once been my whole world. I lived in Cedar Falls, Ohio, in a white 2-story house with blue shutters and a narrow front porch that creaked in the winter. It was not a grand house, but it had a good soul. My husband, Robert Sanders, used to say a house did not need marble floors to be rich. It only needed laughter in the kitchen and somebody waiting for you when you came home. Robert and I bought that house when we were young enough to believe every hard season would pass quickly. He worked as an electrician after serving in the Army, and I spent most of my life doing part-time bookkeeping, church volunteer work, and anything else that helped keep food on the table without taking me too far from Lauren. Robert had big hands, a steady voice, and the kind of patience that made people trust him even before he spoke. He was not a man who wasted words. When he said something, you remembered it. "Tiffany," he used to tell me, "you give too much of yourself away." And I always laughed because I thought that was what love was. I gave Lauren everything I could. When she was little, I cut coupons until my fingers were sore so she could have new school shoes instead of used ones. When she wanted piano lessons, I cleaned offices after dark for 6 months to pay for them. When she cried because other girls had name-brand backpacks, Robert took an extra weekend job rewiring a grocery store so we could surprise her before the first day of school. We were not perfect parents, but we were devoted ones. Lauren was bright from the beginning. She had sharp eyes, neat handwriting, and a way of walking into a room like she already knew where she belonged. Teachers praised her. Church ladies praised her. Robert praised her so often I used to tease him that he would wear out the word proud. When Lauren graduated high school, I cried so hard during the ceremony that Robert had to hand me his handkerchief. She was the first person in our family to go straight to a 4-year college, and we treated that acceptance letter like it was a golden ticket. We did not tell her how much we had to move around to make it happen. We did not tell her Robert cashed out part of an old savings bond. We did not tell her I wore the same winter coat for 7 years because every extra dollar was going toward textbooks, meal plans, and dorm fees. Parents know how to hide sacrifice. We fold it into laundry. We stir it into soup. We smile over the phone and say, "Don't worry about us, baby. Just study hard." And Lauren did study hard. She came home with good grades, polished manners, and dreams bigger than our small town. After graduation, she got hired at Cedar Falls Community Bank. I remember the day she walked into my kitchen wearing her first navy blazer. The sleeves were a little too long, but she stood there glowing. "How do I look?" "Mom?" she asked. "Like somebody important," I told her. Robert was still alive then. He stood in the doorway pretending he had dust in his eye. Later that night, after Lauren drove home, he sat beside me at the kitchen table and said, "We did good, Tiff." Those words stayed with me after he passed. Robert died 6 years later from heart trouble that had been creeping up on him longer than he admitted. Losing him was like waking up in a house where all the clocks had stopped. The mornings were the worst. I would reach across the bed before remembering there was no one there. His coffee mug stayed in the cabinet, chipped on the rim, because I could not bring myself to move it. Lauren was kind after the funeral. I want to be fair about that. She came over with casseroles, helped me sort insurance papers, and sat beside me while I signed forms I could barely see through tears. At the time, I thought grief had brought us closer. I thought she understood that losing Robert had taken half my strength with him. Maybe that was when the first line was crossed. Because in those months after Robert died, I needed help. I needed someone to explain documents, drive me to appointments, and remind me which office needed which copy of the death certificate. Lauren stepped in, and I was grateful. Too grateful, maybe. When she said it would be easier if she had temporary authority to help manage certain paperwork I signed, where she pointed. I trusted her because she was my daughter. I told myself a mother should be able to trust her daughter. For a while, things stayed normal enough. Lauren married Mark Whitaker, a man with smooth hair, shiny shoes, and a handshake that always felt a little too practiced. Robert had never fully warmed to him, though he never said much. Mark worked in real estate investment, or at least that was how Lauren described it. He talked often about markets, equity leverage, and opportunities. I mostly nodded because it all sounded like a language built to make ordinary people feel small. When Lauren had Ethan, my grandson, I helped again. I bought the crib. I paid for part of the hospital bill their insurance did not cover. I watched Ethan when Lauren returned to work. I never complained. That little boy's laugh brought life back into rooms that had been quiet since Robert died. For years, I believed we were still a family. Then the changes came softly. Lauren stopped dropping by without calling. Then she stopped calling unless she needed something. Our Sunday dinners became once a month, then only holidays. Then we'll see Mom, things are busy. When she did visit, she would walk through my house with a tight little frown, as if everything I owned had become outdated overnight. "You still keep paper statements?" she asked once, lifting an envelope from my kitchen counter. "I like to see things printed," I said. She sighed. Not loudly, but enough for me to hear it. "Mom, that's not safe anymore. You really need to let me help modernize things." Modernize. That was one of her favorite words. At first, I thought it was just the way younger people talked. Everything had an app, a password, a code, a security question. I still wrote birthdays on a wall calendar and kept stamps in a small ceramic dish by the phone. Lauren made little jokes about it. "My mother still lives like it's 1998. She told Mark one Thanksgiving. Everyone laughed except Robert's empty chair. After that, she began correcting me more often. If I asked a question about my bank account, she said, "Mom, you wouldn't understand the back-end process." If I mentioned paying a bill by check, she said, "That's exactly how older people get scammed." If I hesitated before entering a password, she would gently take the phone from my hand and say, "Here, let me do it before you lock yourself out." Gently. That was the dangerous part. She did not start cruel. She started helpful. Helpful can look a lot like love when you are lonely. But somewhere along the way, my daughter stopped speaking to me like I was her mother and started speaking to me like I was a problem she had inherited. One afternoon, while we were sitting in my living room, she looked around at the old family photographs on the mantel and said, "Mom, have you ever thought about downsizing?" I laughed because I thought she was joking. Downsizing. From my own home. "It's just a lot for one person," she said. "The stairs, the yard, the maintenance. You have to be realistic. I'm managing fine." Her smile tightened. "For now." Those 2 words stayed with me. For now. After she left, I stood in the hallway and looked at the framed picture of Robert holding Lauren on his shoulders at the county fair. She was 5 years old in that photo, missing a front tooth. Her arms wrapped around his forehead like she never wanted to let go. I touched the glass and wondered when children stopped seeing their parents as people and started seeing them as obstacles. Still, I defended her in my own mind. Lauren was busy. Lauren was stressed. Lauren had a husband, a child, a demanding job. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe old age made every silence feel louder. That is what mothers do when love starts hurting. We explain it away. We soften the sharp edges. We tell ourselves our children do not mean it. But deep down, in a place I did not want to look at yet, I knew something had changed. Lauren was no longer simply worried about me. She was watching me, measuring me, deciding what I could handle and what I could not. And I had no idea that while I was grieving the daughter, I used to know she was already preparing to take control of everything Robert and I had spent our lives building. The first strange thing was the mail. That may sound small to anyone who has never lived alone after losing a husband. But when you are 68 and your house has grown quiet, mail becomes part of the rhythm of your day. Every morning after breakfast, I would walk down the front steps, cross the little brick path Robert laid himself, and open the black mailbox at the curb. Some days there was nothing but grocery flyers. Some days there were church newsletters, insurance papers, or bank statements. But it was mine, my routine, my small proof that the world still knew where to find me. Then slowly the important envelopes stopped coming. At first I blamed the post office. Cedar Falls was not a big city, but mail still got delayed. I told myself maybe a statement came late, maybe a bill had been sent electronically, maybe I had misplaced something. I had always been organized, but grief can make a woman doubt herself. Ever since Robert died, there were moments when I walked into a room and forgot why I had gone there. Little things, harmless things. But Lauren had begun treating those little things like evidence. One Friday afternoon, I was sitting at the kitchen table balancing my checkbook when I realized I had not received my Cedar Falls Community Bank statement in nearly 2 months. I frowned at the empty space in my folder. I kept everything in labeled envelopes. Robert used to tease me about it. "Tiff, if the house ever catches fire, grab your folders first and me second." I would laugh and tell him not to joke that way. But now, with my reading glasses low on my nose, I stared at the folder marked Bank Current Year and felt a small chill move through me. January was there. February was there. March was missing. April was missing. I called Lauren that evening. "Sweetheart," I said, "have you noticed anything strange with my bank statements?" There was a pause, just long enough for me to notice. Strange how she asked. "I haven't received the last couple." "Oh," she said too quickly. "That's probably because the bank is pushing paperless statements now. A lot of customers are being moved over." But I didn't ask to be moved over. Mom, sometimes they notify you and you miss the email. "I don't use email for my bank." Another pause. Then she gave a little sigh, the kind that made me feel like I had already disappointed her. "Mom, this is exactly what I mean. You can't keep managing everything the old-fashioned way. Paper mail gets stolen, checks get washed, seniors get Target D. I'm only trying to keep you safe." "Mom, this is exactly what I mean. You can't keep managing everything the old-fashioned way. Paper mail gets stolen, checks get washed, seniors get targeted. I'm only trying to keep you safe." There it was again. Safe. That word had become Lauren's favorite key. She used it to open doors I had not invited her through. "I understand that," I said carefully, "but I still want my statements mailed to the house." "Fine," she replied. "I'll look into it. Not you should call the bank. Not let me give you the number. Just I'll look into it." I remember holding the phone after she hung up, listening to the silence in my kitchen. The refrigerator hummed. The old wall clock ticked. Outside, someone's dog barked twice and stopped. A daughter helping her mother should have made me feel comforted. Instead, I felt smaller. Over the next few weeks, more little things shifted out of place. My homeowner's insurance notice came late. A prescription reminder went to Lauren's email instead of mine, even though I had never asked the pharmacy to change it. When I called the insurance office, the young woman on the phone said, "It looks like your contact preference was updated." "Updated by whom?" I asked. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I can't see that on this screen." Ma'am. At that time, the word did not yet feel like a wound. It was just what strangers called older women. But I noticed it more after that. Lauren stopped by one Saturday morning carrying 2 coffees and a folder under her arm. She kissed my cheek in the doorway, but her eyes were already moving past me, scanning the house. "You look tired, Mom," she said. "I slept fine. You always say that." She walked into the kitchen without waiting to be invited, placed 1 coffee in front of me, and opened her folder. Inside were printouts about senior fraud estate planning and something called aging in place financial readiness. I sat down slowly. "What is all this?" "Just information." She smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. At the bank, we see so many older clients wait too long to organize things. Then something happens, and their families are left scrambling. "I have things organized. I know you think you do." That sentence landed harder than she probably intended, or maybe exactly as hard as she intended. She began asking questions. Where did I keep the deed to the house? Was Robert's life insurance folder still in the upstairs cabinet? Did I have the original will or just a copy? Who had access to my safe deposit box? Had I written down passwords anywhere? I tried to answer lightly at first. "Goodness, Lauren, are you planning my funeral over coffee?" Her face tightened. "That isn't funny. I didn't mean." "No, Mom, you never take these things seriously until there's a crisis." I stared at her across the table. The same daughter who used to run into my arms after school was now looking at me like I was an overdue assignment. "I take my life seriously," I said. Her expression softened, but only on the surface. "I know. I'm sorry. I just worry about you." And because I was still her mother, because part of me still wanted to believe worry was the same as love, I let the conversation continue. That afternoon, after Lauren left, Mark came by with Ethan. Ethan ran straight into the house and hugged me around the waist. He was 12 then, tall for his age with Robert's serious eyes and Lauren's quick smile. He smelled like grass and peanut butter, and when he asked if I had cookies, my heart felt lighter for the first time all day. Mark stayed on the porch, looking out over the yard. "This place must be a lot to maintain," he said. I followed his gaze to the maple tree Robert planted when Lauren was born. "It keeps me busy." Mark stayed on the porch, looking out over the yard. "This place must be a lot to maintain," he said. I followed his gaze to the maple tree Robert planted when Lauren was born. "It keeps me busy." "Busy is one thing," Mark said. "Expensive is another." I looked at him. He smiled like he was just making conversation. "Property values in this area are strong right now. People your age are sitting on a lot of equity and don't even realize it. My age," he laughed softly. "You know what I mean. Retirees, empty nesters, folks with more house than they need." The words were polite, but something underneath them was not. "I need this house," I said. He held up his hands. "Of course. I'm just saying there are ways to make your assets work for the whole family." The whole family. I watched Ethan through the window sitting at my kitchen table with cookie crumbs on his shirt and felt a knot form in my stomach. I loved my family. I had always shared what I could, but there was a difference between helping and being harvested. That evening, after they left, I stood in the hallway and looked toward the small desk where I kept my household papers. One drawer was not fully closed. I knew I had closed it. I walked over, pulled it open, and moved the folders around. Nothing obvious was missing, but the papers were not exactly how I left them. My insurance folder was on top now. My deed folder had been shifted to the back. I told myself not to be paranoid. Then 2 days later, Linda Parker knocked on my door. Linda had lived next door for 27 years. She was 70, widowed like me, sharp as a sewing needle, and not afraid of anybody's opinion. She came in wearing her gardening gloves and a look I recognized from years of church committee disagreements. "Tiffany," she said, "I don't want to stir up trouble." That was how I knew trouble had already arrived. "What is it?" She lowered her voice. "I saw Lauren at your mailbox yesterday." "My mailbox." She pulled up around noon. "I thought maybe you were expecting her." She opened it, took out a stack of mail, and sat in her car looking through it. My mouth went dry. "Are you sure?" Linda gave me a look. "I know your daughter. She didn't come inside. I figured that." I sat down because my knees suddenly felt uncertain. Linda removed her gloves and placed them on the table. "Honey, I'm not telling you what to do, but if it were me, I'd check my bank account myself." "Not through Lauren." "Myself. I wanted to defend my daughter." The words rose automatically. Lauren is just helping. Lauren worries. Lauren works at the bank. Lauren knows better than I do. But none of those words came out. After Linda left, I went through the kitchen like a woman searching for proof she hoped not to find. I checked the mail basket, the side table, the drawer where I kept coupons and takeout menus. Finally, behind a stack of grocery ads in the bottom kitchen drawer, I found an envelope from Cedar Falls Community Bank. It had already been opened. My hands began to shake before I unfolded the letter. The top line read, "Notice of requested account profile changes. Requested. Not completed, not confirmed, requested." I sat at the table and read it 3 times. The words blurred and sharpened and blurred again. Change of mailing preference. Online access update. Addition of authorized contact. Authorized contact. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it. At the bottom of the page, under a paragraph of formal language, was a line that made the kitchen tilt around me. "If you did not initiate these changes, please contact Cedar Falls Community Bank immediately." I pressed one hand to my chest and looked toward Robert's empty chair. For the first time, I did not ask myself whether I was being too sensitive. I asked myself who in my family had decided I was no longer allowed to know what was happening to my own life. I sat at my kitchen table with the opened bank letter spread flat beneath both hands, as if holding it down could stop my life from changing. The house was quiet, except for the ticking clock above the stove. That clock had been in our kitchen since Lauren was in middle school. Robert bought it at a flea market because he liked the little painted rooster on the face. I used to think its sound was comforting. That evening, every tick felt like a warning. Notice of requested account profile changes. I read the phrase again and again until the words seemed to detach from meaning. Requested by whom? Changed to what? Why had the envelope been opened before I found it? Why was it hidden beneath grocery coupons in a drawer? Lauren knew I barely used. My first instinct was still to protect my daughter from my own suspicion. I remember whispering out loud, "Maybe there's an explanation." But the sound of my own voice made me feel foolish. I reached for the phone and stopped. My hand hovered above it. Calling Lauren would be easier. Calling Lauren was what I had done for years whenever something official confused me. She worked at the bank. She knew the system. She was my daughter. But Linda's words came back to me. Not through Lauren. Yourself. So I picked up the letter and looked for the official number printed at the top. My fingers shook so badly, I had to set the paper down and put on my reading glasses twice. I called the number, slowly pressing each digit like it mattered. The line rang 3 times before an automated voice answered. Thank you for calling Cedar Falls Community Bank. I moved through the menu, pressed 1 for account services, pressed 3 for profile questions, then waited while soft piano music played in my ear. I stared at Robert's empty chair across the table. For one wild second, I wished he would walk in from the garage, wipe his hands on a rag, and say, "Let me handle it, Tiff." But Robert was gone, and for the first time in a long while, I understood that I had been using Lauren as a substitute for courage. A young woman finally came on the line. Cedar Falls Community Bank, this is Melissa. How may I help you today? My name is Tiffany Sanders, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I received a letter about requested changes to my account profile. I didn't request any changes. Okay, Mrs. Sanders. I can take a look. May I verify some information? She asked for my full name, date of birth, address, and the last 4 digits of my social security number. I answered everything. Then I heard her typing. At first, her tone stayed polite and ordinary. Then the typing stopped. Mrs. Sanders, she said, and something in her voice had changed. Yes, are you calling from a private location? I sat straighter. I'm at home. Is anyone with you? No. Why? There was another pause. This one was not short. It was the kind of silence that makes you look over your shoulder, even in your own kitchen. I'm going to advise that you visit the branch in person, she said carefully. Please bring a government-issued ID and any documents related to the letter you received. What kind of documents? The letter itself, any recent statements, and anything you believe may be relevant to what I'm not able to fully discuss the profile status over the phone. My mouth went dry. Is my money gone? I am not showing completed unauthorized withdrawals at this time. At this time. The phrase made my stomach twist. But there is something wrong, I said. Mrs. Sanders, it is important that you come in person. Can you at least tell me who requested the changes? I'm sorry. That must be handled at the branch level. I'm the account holder. I understand. No, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. I don't think you do. I am 68 years old. My husband is dead, and I just found an opened bank letter hidden in my kitchen. If someone is trying to touch my account, I need to know. Her voice softened. Mrs. Sanders, please come in as soon as possible. And if you feel unsafe or pressured by anyone, do not discuss this call with them until you speak with the branch manager. I closed my eyes. There it was. Not spoken directly, but clear enough. Do not discuss this call with them. Who should I ask for? I whispered. David Brooks. He's the branch manager. If he is unavailable, ask for Janet Coleman in Risk Review. Risk Review? I wrote both names on the back of a church bulletin with a pen that barely worked. After I hung up, I sat motionless for a long time. The evening light had begun to fade, turning the kitchen windows dark enough to reflect my own face back at me. I looked older than I felt, or maybe I looked exactly as old as betrayal makes a woman look before she has proof. I placed the bank letter inside my old brown purse, the one Robert bought me for our 40th anniversary. Then I went upstairs to the bedroom and opened the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were things I rarely touched. Robert's folded army jacket, Lauren's baby blanket, old Christmas cards, and the blue file box where I kept the documents Robert always told me mattered. I removed the house deed folder, the life insurance folder, the will, Robert's death certificate, copies of bank statements from the year after he died. My hands moved slowly, but my mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. At the bottom of the file box was a yellow envelope marked Temporary Authorization Lauren. I stared at it. I remembered signing those papers after Robert's funeral. Lauren had sat beside me at this very kitchen table, her hand on my shoulder, telling me it was only to help with administrative things. I had been so tired that month, so hollow. I would have signed almost anything if it meant someone else could stand between me and the world for a while. I opened the envelope, but the legal language swam before my eyes. I could not tell what was still active and what was not. I only knew Lauren had once had access to parts of my life, and I had never fully understood how much. That realization frightened me more than the letter. Just as I returned downstairs, my phone rang. Lauren. I stood in the hallway watching her name glow on the screen. For a moment I considered not answering, but something in me wanted to hear her voice. Maybe I wanted reassurance. Maybe I wanted her to confess. Maybe I wanted my daughter back before the truth made that impossible. I answered. "Hi, Mom," she said. Her tone was bright, too bright. "What are you doing?" "Just cleaning up after dinner." Another pause. "Everything okay?" "Yes. Why?" "No reason. I just had a weird day at work." I held the phone tighter. "At the bank." "That is where I work, Mom." The little edge in her voice was familiar now. "I know that." She exhaled. "I didn't mean it like that. I'm tired. So am I." For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "Did you happen to call the bank today?" My blood seemed to cool inside my veins. I looked toward my purse on the kitchen chair where the letter was hidden. "Why would you ask me that?" "I just wondered. There was some internal note about your profile, and I thought maybe you got confused by a letter or something." "A letter or something?" "I did receive a letter," I said. "Mom." Her voice changed immediately, sliding into that controlled softness she used when she wanted me to feel unreasonable. "You shouldn't worry about those automated notices. Banks send them all the time." It said changes had been requested. "Yes, because I've been trying to help organize your online access." "I didn't ask you to do that." "I know you didn't ask," she said, and now there was impatience under the sweetness. "That's the problem. You wait until things become emergencies." I sat down slowly. "What changes did you request, Lauren?" "Nothing serious. That is not an answer. It was just contact preferences, security updates, making sure I can help if something happens. If something happens to whom?" "To you, Mom." "But nothing has happened to me. You're getting older." The words were not shouted. They were worse than shouted. They were delivered gently like a verdict already signed. "I am aware of my age," I said. "I don't think you are." "Not really. You still act like you and Dad are handling everything together. But Dad is gone." The cruelty of that sentence was so quiet, it took a moment to fully enter me. When I spoke, my voice was lower. "Do not use your father to justify going behind my back." "I am not going behind your back." "Then why am not going behind your back?" "Then woo. Hi." Was my letter opened? Silence. A long one. "Lauren." "I don't know what you mean. It was opened and hidden in my kitchen drawer." "That sounds like something you may have misplaced." "How was my letter opened?" Silence. A long one. "Lauren, I don't know what you mean. It was opened and hidden in my kitchen drawer." "That sounds like something you may have misplaced." There it was. The first clean cut. Not a misunderstanding, not concern, not help. She was willing to make me doubt my own mind. I stood up, though there was no one there to see me do it. "I'm going to the bank tomorrow." "No," she said quickly. The word came too fast. Then she corrected herself. "I mean, don't go alone. I can take you after work." "I'm going in the morning. Mom, you'll just confuse the staff. There are procedures you don't understand. I understand my name. This isn't about your name. It is when it's on my account." Her breathing changed. "Please don't make this dramatic," she said. I almost laughed. Dramatic. A daughter could open her mother's mail request account. Changes, hide a bank notice, and then call the mother dramatic for noticing. "I'll speak with Mr. Brooks myself," I said. Another silence. When Lauren spoke again, her voice was colder. Fine, but don't say things you can't take back. I looked at Robert's empty chair. I was about to tell you the same thing. Then I hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness anymore. From heartbreak, yes. From fear, yes. But underneath both was something I had not felt in years. Resolve. That night, I packed my purse like I was preparing for court. Driver's license, social security card, Robert's death certificate, old statements, the opened bank letter, the temporary authorization folder, my checkbook, my reading glasses, a small packet of tissues. Before bed, I walked through the house, touching the backs of chairs, the stair rail, the framed pictures on the mantel. This was not just property. This was the map of my life. Robert's fingerprints were in the patched porch boards. Lauren's childhood was in the pencil marks on the pantry doorframe. My own years were in every polished table, every curtain I washed, every room I had prayed in. And someone had decided I was too old to be trusted with it. I slept badly. When dawn came, I dressed in my navy coat, pinned my silver hair back, and placed Robert's wedding ring on the chain around my neck. I looked at myself in the mirror and tried to see what Lauren saw. A confused old woman, a problem, a signature waiting to be replaced. No. I saw Tiffany Sanders, and I was going to the bank to make sure everyone else saw her too. The morning I went to Cedar Falls Community Bank, I dressed like I was going somewhere important. Not fancy. I had never been a fancy woman. But I put on my navy coat, the one Robert used to say made my eyes look younger. And I pinned my silver hair back with the pearl clip Lauren gave me one Mother's Day, before her voice learned how to sound impatient with me. I stood in front of the bedroom mirror longer than usual. Not because I cared how I looked to strangers, but because I was trying to steady the woman staring back at me. My hands wanted to tremble. I would not let them. Inside my brown purse, I packed everything I thought might matter. My driver's license, my social security card, the opened bank letter, 3 old bank statements, Robert's death certificate, the folder marked temporary authorization, Lauren, my checkbook, my reading glasses, a small packet of tissues because I knew myself well enough to know I might need them. Before leaving, I paused in the hallway by Robert's photograph. He was standing beside the maple tree in that picture, smiling with one hand on Lauren's shoulder. She must have been about 16, all braces and attitude, leaning away from him like teenagers do, but still smiling. I touched the edge of the frame. "I'm going, Robert," I whispered, "and I'm going alone." The drive to the bank took less than 15 minutes, but it felt longer. Every red light gave my mind room to turn against me. What if Lauren was right? What if I had misunderstood? What if I walked into that bank and made a fool of myself? What if the staff looked at me the same way? Lauren had begun looking at me with soft, professional pity. Then I remembered the opened envelope hidden in my kitchen drawer. No. A woman does not accidentally hide her own mail from herself. Cedar Falls Community Bank sat on the corner of Maple and 3rd, across from the pharmacy and the little bakery where Robert used to buy cinnamon rolls on Saturday mornings. It was a brick building with polished windows, a flag out front, and flower planters by the entrance. I had walked through those doors many times over the years. To deposit checks, to open Lauren's first savings account, to sit beside Robert while he discussed retirement plans in a low, careful voice. That morning, the bank looked exactly the same. I was the one who had changed. The moment I stepped inside, warm air brushed my face. The lobby smelled faintly of coffee paper and floor cleaner. There were 3 customers in line, 2 tellers behind the counter, and a young man near the entrance greeting people with a tablet in his hand. Somewhere, A printer hummed. Then I saw Lauren. She was standing behind the counter near the far station, wearing a cream blouse under a gray blazer. Her hair was pulled back neatly. Her name badge caught the light. She looked polished, composed, respectable. The kind of woman people trusted with their money. For a second, my heart betrayed me, because I did not see the woman who had asked about my deed or hidden my letter. I saw my little girl in her first bank blazer standing in my kitchen asking, "How do I look, Mom?" I walked toward her before I could stop myself. "Lauren," I said softly. Her eyes lifted. For one brief moment, she recognized me. Not as a customer, not as an old woman, as her mother. I saw it flash across her face. I walked toward her before I could stop myself. "Lauren," I said softly. Her eyes lifted. For one brief moment, she recognized me. Not as a customer, not as an old woman, as her mother. I saw it flash across her face. Surprise, fear, calculation. Then it vanished. Her mouth formed a small, polite smile, the kind she probably gave difficult clients. "Ma'am," she said, "you'll need to take a seat and wait your turn." The word struck me so sharply I almost looked behind me to see who she was speaking to. Ma'am, not Mom, not even Mother. Mom. The customer at the next window glanced over. The young man with the tablet looked up. One of the tellers paused with her hand above a keyboard. I felt heat crawl up my neck. "Lauren," I said again, lower this time. "It's me." Her smile stayed fixed. "I understand, ma'am, but we assist customers in the order they arrive, unless they have an appointment." I stared at her. She was pretending. My daughter was pretending she did not know me. "I need to talk to you about my account." I said, my voice thinner than I wanted. "For account concerns, you'll need to sign in and wait for an available representative." She turned slightly toward the young man by the entrance. "Caleb, could you help this customer check in?" This customer. Something inside me cracked so quietly no one else heard it. Caleb approached with a friendly smile. He could not have been more than 25. "Good morning, ma'am. What brings you in today?" I wanted to say, "My daughter is standing 6 feet away, pretending I did not raise her." I wanted to say, "I paid for the education that taught her to speak to me like that." I wanted to say, "I used to hold her when she had nightmares, and now she is making one out of my life." Instead, I opened my purse and pulled out the folded letter. I was told to ask for David Brooks. At the sound of that name, Lauren's eyes moved back to me. Just a flicker, but I saw it. Caleb's expression changed from cheerful to attentive. "Mr. Brooks, do you have an appointment with him?" "No," I said, "but I was told to come in person." Lauren stepped from behind her station. "Caleb, I can handle this." Her voice was still professional, but there was something tight beneath it. I held the letter closer to my chest. "I would prefer to speak with Mr. Brooks." Lauren's jaw tightened. "Mom," she whispered. There it was. Mom. Not loud enough for anyone else to hear. Just loud enough to remind me she had chosen not to say it before. I turned toward her slowly. "So you do know me." Color rose in her cheeks. "Don't do this here. Do what make a scene." I looked around the quiet lobby. No one was shouting. No one was waving arms. The only scene was the one she had created by turning her mother into a stranger. "I came here because the bank told me to come here," I said. Lauren took one step closer, lowering her voice. "You don't understand how this works. Let me review the letter first, and then we can decide if you need to speak to anyone." She reached for the paper. I pulled it back. Her eyes hardened. That look frightened me more than anger would have. Anger is hot. This was cold. This was the look of someone who had expected obedience and found resistance instead. Before she could say another word, a deep voice came from behind us. "Mrs. Sanders." I turned. David Brooks stood near the hallway that led to the offices. He was a tall man in his mid-50s, with close-cropped gray hair, a dark suit, and the serious face of someone who had spent years learning not to react too quickly. I knew him only in passing. Robert had spoken with him more than I ever had, but I remembered his handshake from Robert's funeral. Firm, respectful, 2 hands around mine. "Yes," I said. "I'm Tiffany Sanders." His gaze dropped to the letter in my hand, then to my purse, then briefly to Lauren. Something changed in his face. Not panic, not exactly. Recognition, concern. Panic. Not exactly. Recognition, concern. He walked toward us slowly. "Mrs. Sanders, I'm glad you came in." Lauren spoke quickly. "David, I was just about to assist her. There's no need to—" He lifted one hand. Not rude, but final. "Lauren not here." He walked toward us slowly. "Mrs. Sanders, I'm glad you came in." Lauren spoke quickly. "David, I was just about to assist her. There's no need to." He lifted one hand. Not rude, but final. "Lauren not here." The lobby seemed to grow quieter. David turned to Caleb. "Please ask Janet Coleman to join us in conference room 2. Caleb nodded and hurried away. Lauren's face went pale. "David," she said, still trying to smile. "I really think this is unnecessary." His voice lowered. "I said, conference room 2. Then he looked toward the door. "I'm sorry, but I can't let you in." "Ference room 2. Then he looked toward the tellers. "Temporarily close the private service area. No account profile changes processed until I clear them." One of the tellers froze. "All profile changes." "All," David said. My heartbeat quickened. "Private service area. Profile changes. Janet Coleman." These were not the words of a man dealing with a confused old woman who misplaced a letter. These were the words of a man who had been waiting for something. David turned back to me. His expression softened. "Mrs. Sanders, please come with me." I followed him toward the hallway, each step sounding too loud against the polished floor. Lauren walked beside us, no longer pretending she was calm. Her hands were clenched at her sides. The daughter who had called me ma'am 5 minutes earlier now looked like a child caught with matches near a curtain. At the conference room door, David paused and waited for me to enter first. It was a small room with a long table, 6 chairs, a wall-mounted screen, and blinds half closed against the morning sun. I sat near the end of the table and placed my purse in my lap. Lauren took the chair across from me, but she would not meet my eyes. A woman in a burgundy blazer entered carrying a folder and a laptop. "Mrs. Sanders." David said, "This is Janet Coleman, our senior risk review officer." Risk review. The words Melissa had given me on the phone. Janet shook my hand gently. "Thank you for coming in today." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. David closed the conference room door. The click of the latch sounded small, but it changed everything. Outside that door, Lauren had been a polished bank employee, and I had been an old customer holding up the line. Inside that room, something else was waiting. David sat down, folded his hands on the table, and looked at me with a seriousness that made my stomach drop. "Mrs. Sanders," he said before we begin, "I need to ask you one direct question." Lauren's eyes snapped toward him. I swallowed. "All right." He slid the bank letter gently across the table. Did you personally authorize anyone to change your mailing address, online access, or account contact permissions within the last 60 days? The room went still. I looked at Lauren. She was staring at the table now, her lips pressed together so tightly they had gone white. Then I looked back at David Brooks. No, I said. I did not. Janet opened her folder, and my daughter closed her eyes, like the truth had finally entered the room. David Brooks did not speak right away after I said no. That silence frightened me more than an accusation would have. Accusations give a person something to answer. Silence gives guilt room to move around. Across the conference table, Lauren sat with her hands folded so tightly, her knuckles looked pale. She was still wearing her employee smile, but it had gone thin around the edges. I could see the muscle in her jaw working. I had seen that same look on her face when she was a teenager and had been caught lying about where she had gone after school. Back then, the lie had been about a movie theater and a boy with a motorcycle. This time, it was about my life. David placed one hand flat on the folder in front of him. "Mrs. Sanders," he said carefully, "I want you to know that no one in this room is here to embarrass you. Our priority is protecting your accounts and making sure every change is properly authorized." Lauren leaned forward. "Exactly, and that's what I was trying to do." David turned his head slightly. "Lauren will ask you to let Mrs. Sanders answer first." The way he said it made the room colder. My daughter looked down. Janet Coleman opened her laptop and typed something. The screen cast a pale glow across her face. She was calm, but not soft. She had the kind of calm that comes from seeing too many people try to explain away things they knew they should not have done. "Mrs. Sanders," Janet said, "within the last several weeks, our system received multiple requests connected to your customer profile. Some were submitted electronically. Some were initiated through internal service channels." I felt my fingers tighten around the handles of my purse. "What kind of requests?" Janet glanced at David before answering. "A change to mailing preferences, an update to online access recovery options, an attempt to add an authorized contact, and a request to review representative access connected to an older temporary authorization." The words came one after another, polite and professional, but each one felt like someone opening a drawer in my house without permission. I looked at Lauren. She was staring at Janet now, not me. "I didn't approve any of that," I said. Lauren gave a small laugh. "Not a happy one. A nervous little sound." "Mom, you're making it sound sinister. These are standard maintenance issues." "Then why didn't you tell me I tried to explain things to you?" "No," I said. "You told me not to worry. That's because you panic over paperwork." I heard myself inhale. David's eyes moved from Lauren to me, then back to Lauren. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, "please be mindful of your tone." For the first time since we entered the room, Lauren looked truly startled. At home, she could speak to me however she wanted. In that room in front of her manager, her polished mask had to hold. She adjusted her blazer. "I apologize," she said, though she did not say who she was apologizing to. "I just mean my mother has had a difficult time since my father passed. She gets overwhelmed easily." There it was again. Not cruel enough to sound like an attack. Gentle enough to be dangerous. I stared at her across the table. My daughter did not need to shout to diminish me. She had learned how to use concern like a knife wrapped in velvet. David folded his hands. "Mrs. Sanders, did you ask your daughter to manage your online access? No. Did you ask her to receive your bank statements electronically? No. Did you ask her to be added as an authorized contact on your accounts? No. Did you ask her to review or reactivate any temporary authority related to your financial affairs? No." Each no made Lauren's face tighten a little more. She finally turned toward me. "Mom, you're not understanding the question. I understand the word no." Her eyes flashed. "That's not fair." What part? You're acting like I'm some stranger trying to steal from you. The word stranger landed between us like a dropped glass. I almost smiled, but there was no humor in me. Aren't you the one who treated me like a stranger 10 minutes ago? Lauren looked away. Janet stopped typing. David's expression remained professional, but I saw his eyes lower for a moment. Maybe he had heard enough of the lobby exchange to understand. Maybe he had seen the whole thing from the hallway. Either way, he did not correct me. Lauren pressed her lips together. I was at work. I have to follow procedures. You remembered procedure, I said quietly, but forgot your mother. Her face reddened. David cleared his throat, not harshly, but enough to bring the conversation back. There is another issue, he said. My stomach tightened. Janet turned the laptop slightly, not enough for me to see details, just enough to show she was referring to something specific. As part of routine verification, several submitted forms were compared against signature samples we have on file. There were inconsistencies. Lauren spoke too quickly. Older people's signatures change. I turned to her. She did not even seem to realize what she had said. Older people. Not my mother. Not Mom. Older people. Janet's gaze shifted to Lauren. That can happen, which is why we don't draw conclusions from one variation. But these inconsistencies appeared across multiple documents and they followed a pattern. What pattern? I asked. The signature resembles yours at first glance, Janet said, but the pressure spacing and ending strokes differ from historical samples. I felt cold all over. Are you saying someone signed my name? David answered before Janet could. We are saying the signatures require direct verification for MU before any further action is taken. I felt cold all over. Are you saying someone signed my name? David answered before Janet could. We are saying the signatures require direct verification from you before any further action is taken. Lauren sat back in her chair. This is being blown out of proportion, she said. I filled out parts of some forms to help her. That's all. I looked at her. You filled out forms with my name on them, not your signature, she snapped. Then she caught herself. I mean, not like that. Like what? She swallowed. For the first time, I saw fear in her face. Not sadness, not guilt. Fear. David leaned back slightly. Lauren, he said, given your role at this branch, you understand why this is serious. I understand compliance, she said. Then you understand why you should not have been involved in processing or initiating profile changes for an immediate family member without appropriate disclosure and documentation. Her face went even paler. I turned toward David. She works here. Doesn't that mean someone should have stopped this? Janet's voice was gentle but clear. Some of the activity was flagged. That is why your profile was restricted pending verification. That is also why the letter was generated. The letter. The one hidden in my kitchen drawer. I looked at Lauren again, and suddenly, another pain rose in me. Not fear, but humiliation. I realized that if Linda had not seen her at my mailbox, if I had not searched the drawer, if I had simply trusted the silence, this meeting might never have happened. My own daughter had been counting on my obedience, my confusion, or my love. Maybe all three. Lauren placed both palms on the table. Mom, please, you're letting them scare you. I was only trying to prevent problems before they happened. What problems? She hesitated. David watched her closely. Lauren's voice softened. You live alone. You forget things. You don't understand online security. You keep checks in unlocked drawers. You leave documents where anyone could find them. Anyone? I said. Or you. Her mouth opened, then closed. I had never spoken to her that way before. Not even when she was young. I had raised Lauren with patience. Sometimes too much patience. Even when she hurt me, I softened myself before answering. That morning, I did not. She looked at David. My mother has been struggling. She won't admit it, but she has. She forgets appointments. She misplaces things. She called me twice last month asking about the same insurance form. She left the stove burner on once. I felt my face grow hot. That was one time. It could have burned the house down. I turned it off myself. After I reminded you, you weren't even there. You told me about it later. And you saved it, I said. You saved it like evidence. That stopped her. My voice shook now, but not with weakness. How long have you been collecting little things to prove I can't handle my own life? Lauren's eyes filled with tears, but I did not know whether they were real or useful. I'm not collecting anything? She whispered. Yes, you are. David's voice became quieter. Mrs. Whitaker, have you documented concerns about your mother's capacity in any internal banknotes? Lauren turned sharply toward him. I only noted that she may need assistance. Janet typed something. My heart sank. You wrote that in my bank file. I asked. Lauren did not answer. I thought of every private moment she had turned into a record. Every forgotten name. Every misplaced key. Every time I asked her to repeat something because my hearing was not what it used to be. She had not seen a mother aging. She had seen an opportunity. David looked at me. Mrs. Sanders, I want to be very clear. Being older does not remove your authority over your own accounts. Needing help with technology does not remove your legal rights. Forgetting an appointment does not authorize another person to make changes without your consent. I blinked hard. No one had said it to me like that before. Lauren had made me feel as if every wrinkle was a weakness, every question a confession, every need for help a step toward losing my independence. Hearing David say otherwise made something inside me loosen. I nodded. Thank you. Lauren wiped under one eye. So that's it. Everyone just believes I'm some kind of criminal? I looked at her for a long moment. I don't know what you are right now. She flinched. The words hurt me too. But they were true. Janet reached into her folder and removed several printed pages. She placed them in front of David, not me. There is also the issue of the temporary authorization from 6 years ago. Janet reached into her folder and removed several printed pages. She placed them in front of David, not me. There is also the issue of the temporary authorization from 6 years ago, she said. I straightened. I brought that folder. I opened my purse and pulled it out. My hands shook as I slid it across the table. David accepted it with a nod. Lauren's eyes fixed on the yellow envelope. The fear in her face deepened. David opened the folder, reviewed the top page, then passed it to Janet. She compared the document with something in her file. This authorization was limited, Janet said. I leaned forward. Limited how? It appears to have been created during Mr. Sanders' final illness to assist with specific administrative matters. It was not a blanket authority over all financial assets. Lauren said nothing. Janet turned another page. And according to our records, a revocation was submitted later. Lauren's head lifted. My breath caught. A revocation? I asked. David looked at me. Do you remember signing a document after your husband's estate matters were settled? I searched my memory. Those months after Robert died were foggy around the edges. Grief had blurred so many things. I remembered Lauren bringing many things. I remembered Lauren bringing papers. I remembered a notary at the kitchen table. I remembered Grace Mitchell, our family attorney, telling me that temporary measures should not remain open longer than necessary. I think so, papers. I remembered a notary at the kitchen table. I remembered Grace Mitchell, our family attorney, telling me that temporary measures should not remain open longer than necessary. I think so, I said slowly. I remember our lawyer saying we should clean things up after the funeral matters were done. Janet nodded. That revocation appears valid. Lauren's chair creaked as she shifted. David looked directly at her. Which means any attempt to rely on the old authorization now would be improper. The word improper sounded almost polite, but Lauren looked as if he had slapped her. I stared at my daughter, and for one terrible moment, the room disappeared. I saw her at 7 years old, asleep on the couch, with a fever, while I held a cool cloth to her forehead. I saw her at 17, crying after her first heartbreak. I saw her at 30, holding newborn Ethan, with tears streaming down her face, whispering, "I don't know how to be a mother." I had taught her how, or I thought I had. Now she sat across from me in a bank conference room, while strangers explained how she had tried to use my grief, my age, and an old authorization to reach into my accounts without my consent. I put one hand over Robert's wedding ring beneath my blouse. "Lauren," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "what were you trying to do?" She looked at me then, really looked. For a split second, my daughter was there. Not the bank employee, not the polished woman, not Mark's wife with expensive shoes and careful words. Just my child cornered by the truth. Her lips trembled. "I was trying to help," she said. But no one in that room believed her anymore. Not David, not Janet, not even Lauren herself. David closed the folder. "Mrs. Sanders, he said we are going to freeze all pending profile changes until this review is complete. Nothing will be added, removed, transferred, or updated without your direct written and in-person authorization." I nodded, but I could hardly breathe. Lauren suddenly stood. "I need a minute." David's voice hardened. "Sit down, Lauren." She froze. It was the first time I had ever heard a man speak to my daughter with authority and watch her obey. Slowly, she sat. David turned back to me. "There are still several documents we need to review with you," he said. "Some of them may be upsetting." I looked at Lauren. She looked away. My heart already felt broken, but somehow I knew there was more coming. "Show me," I said. Janet opened the folder wider, and that was when I understood the meeting had only just begun. Janet did not slide the next stack of papers toward me right away. She placed one hand over them almost protectively, as if paper could bruise a person if handed over too quickly. I appreciated that small kindness more than she probably knew. By then, my chest felt tight, and the conference room seemed smaller than when we had entered. The blinds were half closed, cutting the morning sun into narrow stripes across the table. One bright line fell across Lauren's folded hands. Her wedding ring flashed every time she moved her fingers. I wondered if Mark knew she was sitting there. I wondered if he was waiting for her to call with good news. I wondered how many conversations about my money had taken place at their kitchen table while I was at home praying for them. David looked at me. "Mrs. Sanders, before Janet continues, do you feel able to proceed?" It was a simple question, but it nearly undid me. For weeks, maybe months, Lauren had treated me as if my feelings were obstacles and my questions were annoyances. David asking whether I was able to continue reminded me that being respected can feel shocking when you have grown used to being managed. I nodded. "Yes." Lauren looked up quickly. "Mom, you don't have to keep doing this." Her voice had changed. It was softer now, but not the soft voice of love. It was the soft voice of someone trying to lead a frightened animal away from a road. "I do," I said. "No, you don't. We can talk at home. This has gotten out of hand. That is exactly why we are not talking at home." Her eyes narrowed for half a second. Then she sighed and turned toward David. "She's upset. Can't you see that David did not move? Mrs. Sanders is entitled to be upset. She doesn't understand the internal side of this." Then we will explain it to her." Lauren pressed her lips together. That was when I reached into my purse and pulled out the one paper I had not yet shown them. I had nearly left it at home because part of me felt embarrassed to need it. Now I was grateful I had brought it. It was folded inside a white envelope with my name written in blue ink. I placed it on the table. "What is that?" Lauren asked. I did not answer her. I looked at David. "It's a letter from my doctor." Lauren's face changed immediately. Not dramatically, not enough for a stranger to notice. But I was her mother. I had watched every expression that face could make since the day she was born. She was surprised. "Good." David nodded. "May I?" "Yes." He opened the envelope and removed the paper. Janet leaned slightly toward him as he read. The room stayed quiet, except for the faint hum of the air vent. Lauren gave a dry little laugh. "Mom, why would you bring a doctor's note to a bank?" I turned toward her. "Because you keep telling people I'm confused." "I never said it like that. You said I forget things. You said I don't understand. You put notes in my file saying I may need assistance. You told me not to come here alone because I would confuse the staff." "That's not the same as saying you're incompetent. It is when you say it to people holding my money." Her eyes filled again, but I was starting to understand that tears could arrive for many reasons. Guilt, fear, anger, strategy. David laid the paper flat. "This letter is from Dr. Karen Ellis," he asked. "Yes, she has been my doctor for almost 15 years. Janet read from the page, not aloud, but carefully. Then she looked at me. "Mrs. Sanders, this states that you were evaluated recently, and that in Dr. Ellis's medical opinion, you demonstrate full capacity to manage personal financial and legal decisions." Lauren's face went blank. "I went to see her 3 weeks ago," I said, "after the first missing statement, after you asked about my deed for the 3rd time, after you told Mark I was becoming forgetful while I stood in my own kitchen." Lauren whispered, "I didn't know you heard that." "No," I said, "you didn't." I remembered that day clearly. Lauren and Mark had been in the hallway near the front door speaking in low voices while I rinsed coffee cups in the kitchen. Mark had said, "You need something stronger than concern, Lauren. If she pushes back, you'll need a record." Lauren had answered, "I know. I am building one." At the time, I had told myself I must have misunderstood. Mothers are very good at protecting themselves from the truth until the truth stops asking permission. Lauren stared at me, and for the first time that morning, she looked ashamed. "I was worried," she said. "No," I replied. "You were preparing." David's expression sharpened slightly, but he did not interrupt. I reached into my purse again and pulled out a second document, this one stapled and creased from being stored too long. "This is what our attorney gave me after Robert died," I said. "I didn't understand all of it then. I do now." Janet accepted it. Lauren sat up straighter. "What is that, the revocation?" Her mouth opened, but no words came out. David looked at the page. "This appears to revoke the temporary financial authorization previously granted to Lauren Whitaker." "It does," Janet said after reviewing the notary seal. "Signed by Tiffany Sanders, witnessed and notarized." I looked at Lauren. "Grace Mitchell told me temporary help should stay temporary. I remember that now. You were angry after that meeting. I was not angry. You barely spoke to me on the drive home. That was grief, Mom. Mine or yours?" The question hung between us. Lauren looked down again. For years, I had let her rewrite moments because I did not want conflict. If she said she was just tired, I believed her. If she said I was too sensitive, I tried to become less sensitive. If she said I misunderstood, I folded my own memory into a smaller shape to make room for hers. But not there. Not in that room. Not with my name on forms I did not sign. David placed both documents, the doctor's letter and the revocation, side by side on the table. "These are significant," he said. Lauren turned toward him, panic slipping into her voice. "David, she could have gotten that doctor's note because she wanted to prove a point." "It doesn't mean she never needs help." Janet spoke before I could. "Needing help is not the issue. Consent is the issue." Lauren looked at Janet like she had been slapped. Janet continued calm and exact. "A customer can ask for assistance. A customer can authorize someone. A customer can revoke that authorization. What we cannot do is allow a third party, even a family member, to use concern as a substitute for permission." Third party, family member, permission. Those words were clean, clear. They cut through the fog Lauren had been building around me for months. Lauren's voice broke. "I'm not a third party. I'm her daughter." I felt that one deep. Because she was right. She was my daughter. That was the whole reason it hurt. I turned toward her, and my voice was quieter now. "Then why didn't you act like one?" Her face crumpled for a second, but only for a second. Then the defensiveness came back. "You don't understand what it's like," she said. "You sit in that house surrounded by old papers and memories, acting like nothing has changed. But everything has changed. Dad is gone. You are alone. I have Ethan to think about. I have a household. I have responsibilities. And I am one of them." She hesitated. That hesitation answered me. I leaned back in my chair as if the air had been pushed from my lungs. All those years, I had thought Lauren saw me as lonely, maybe stubborn, maybe old-fashioned. But now I realized something far worse. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped seeing me as the woman who raised her and started seeing me as a responsibility to be managed, an asset to be organized, a problem to be solved before it inconvenienced her life. David closed the folder gently. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, "were you aware this revocation existed?" Lauren's eyes flicked to mine. "I knew there had been some paperwork," she said. "That is not what I asked." She swallowed. "Yes." The word was barely audible. My heart dropped. David did not let the silence stretch. "So you knew the temporary authorization had been revoked?" Lauren's voice turned defensive again. "I didn't know the bank still recognized it that way. I thought because I was her daughter and because I worked here?" "You thought rules would bend," Janet said. Lauren looked at her sharply. Janet did not blink. I sat very still. That was the moment I realized Lauren had not stumbled into this blindly. She had known the old authorization was gone. She had known I had reclaimed my authority after Robert died. And still, she had tried to reach back into that closed door and pry it open. "Lauren," I said. She turned to me slowly. Did you think I had forgotten tears slipped down her face? You forget a lot of things. The cruelty came out before she could dress it up. No one spoke. Even Lauren seemed shocked by herself. I felt something inside me go very quiet. Not numb, not empty. Quiet. Like the part of me that had begged for an explanation finally sat down and stopped pleading. I opened my purse once more and took out a small notepad. On it, I had written questions the night before in careful, shaky handwriting. I had been afraid I would forget them under pressure. I looked at the first one. Did you change my mailing preferences? Lauren did not answer. David said, Mrs. Whitaker. She wiped her face. I submitted a request. Without asking me, I was going to tell you. When? No answer. I read the next question. Did you try to add yourself as an authorized contact? I thought it would make things easier. For whom? For everyone. There is that word again, I said. Everyone. Lauren's mouth tightened. I looked down at the third question. My hand trembled now, but I forced myself to ask it. Did you try to use the old authorization after knowing it had been revoked? She looked at David. Then Janet. Then finally me. I thought IT could still help establish continuity. Did you try to use the old authorization after knowing it had been revoked? She looked at David. Then Janet. Then finally me. I thought it could still help establish continuity. I almost did not understand the phrase. It sounded like something copied from a training manual. Continuity, I repeated. Lauren nodded quickly, as if she had found safer ground. Yes, a history of assistance, a pattern showing I've helped you before. A pattern, I said. I turned to David. Is that how someone tries to prove an older person needs management? David's jaw tightened. Sometimes, yes. There it was. The shape of the thing. Not one mistake. Not one form. Not one worried daughter. A pattern. Lauren had been building a pattern around me using every normal sign of aging as a brick. A forgotten appointment. A missing envelope. A burner left on once. A daughter helping with paperwork. An old authorization. A note in a bank file. A changed mailing preference. Each piece alone looked small. Together, they could become a cage. I looked at my daughter, and I no longer recognized the woman across from me. I loved you so much, I said. Her face twisted. Loved, the word escaped her like a cry. I had not meant to use past tense, or maybe some deeper part of me had. I love you, I corrected softly. But I will not let you use that love to erase me. Lauren covered her mouth with one hand. David gathered the documents into a neat stack. Given the doctor's letter and the revocation, Mrs. Sanders remains the sole authority for her personal accounts unless a court order says otherwise. There will be no changes without her direct consent. Janet nodded. I'll update the internal review file accordingly. Lauren suddenly stood again. This time, her chair scraped loudly against the floor. I can't sit here while you all treat me like I'm abusing my mother. David's voice was firm. Sit down. I work here. Not in this matter, you don't. Lauren froze, breathing hard. For 1 second, I saw pure anger in her eyes. Not fear, not shame. Anger that she had lost control of the room. Then she sat. I folded my hands on top of my purse, feeling Robert's ring beneath my blouse like a small circle of courage. David looked at Janet. Show Mrs. Sanders the submitted forms. Lauren's head snapped up. No, she said. That one word came out raw. I turned toward her. Her face had gone pale again, paler than before. Janet paused with her fingers on the folder. David looked at Lauren for a long, measured moment. Then he said, That reaction tells me she needs to see them. Janet opened the folder. And for the first time, I saw my name written in a way that looked almost like mine, but wasn't. The first form Janet placed in front of me was only 2 pages long. It should not have scared me. Paper is just paper until someone uses it as a weapon. But the moment I saw my name typed across the top, Tiffany Sanders, I felt as if a stranger had walked into my bedroom and opened my dresser drawers. Customer profile maintenance request. My eyes moved slowly down the page. Address preference. Statement delivery. Online recovery phone number. Secondary contact. My name appeared at the bottom, or something close to my name. The signature had the same general shape as mine. The tall T. The long sweep under Sanders. At a quick glance, I understood how someone might believe I had signed it. But I had been signing my name for more than 50 years. A woman knows her own handwriting, the way she knows the sound of her child crying in a crowded room. That is not mine, I said. Lauren did not look at the paper. Janet nodded. Can you tell us what looks different to you? I adjusted my glasses, though my vision was not the problem. The problem was that looking at the signature made me feel violated in a way I had no words for. The end, I said. The S in Sanders. I never drag it that far down. Janet leaned closer, and the T I continued. I pause after the first line. Robert used to joke that my T looked like it was wearing a hat. The memory slipped out before I could stop it. Robert had noticed things like that. Tiny things. He once told me he could pick my grocery list out of a pile of papers because my letters leaned forward like they were in a hurry to be helpful. I had laughed at the time. Now sitting in that cold bank conference room, the memory hurt so badly I had to press my lips together. David studied the signature. Janet pulled another sheet from the folder and laid it beside the first. This is one of your historical signature cards from several years ago. The difference was subtle, but clear. My real signature had pressure at the beginning and lightness at the end. The false one was too careful all the way through, as if someone had drawn it rather than written it. Someone copied it? I whispered. Lauren's face tightened. Mom, she said, people's signatures change. I turned to her. Do they change into someone else's? She flinched. David did not soften his voice. Lauren, you've already made that point. Janet is documenting Mrs. Sanders's direct statement. Lauren looked at him sharply, then dropped her gaze. Janet placed a second form on the table. This one was connected to adding an authorized contact for account alerts. I looked down. Again my name. Again the almost signature. Again that strange feeling of being present at my own erasure. The authorized contact listed was Lauren Whitaker. Her phone number, her email address, her work extension. My stomach turned. You were making sure everything came to you, I said. Lauren shook her head. No, alerts are not the same as control, but they are the first step, David said. Lauren froze. David's expression remained steady. Access to alerts can give a person information about balances, movement changes, and security notifications. It matters, Janet added, especially if the customer did not consent. Lauren's eyes flashed. I was trying to make sure she didn't miss anything. I touched the opened bank letter in my purse. You mean the way I almost missed this? No answer. The next form was worse. Online banking recovery update. I had never used online banking without Lauren beside me. I knew enough to check simple things if someone walked me through them, but I did not trust myself with passwords and codes. Lauren knew that. She had made me feel ashamed of it often enough. On the form, the recovery phone number had been changed. Not to mine, to Lauren's. A backup email had been added. Not mine, Lauren's. I looked at the paper, then across the table at my daughter. If this had gone through, I asked slowly, would the bank have sent codes to you instead of me? Janet answered. For certain recovery functions, yes. I closed my eyes. For weeks, Lauren had told me I was unsafe because I did not understand technology. Meanwhile, she had been trying to place herself between me and the very security systems meant to protect me. Lauren, I said, how could you? Her face crumpled, but her voice came out defensive. You never answer security texts. You panic when you get verification codes. You call me every time something asks for a password. Because I trusted you to help me, I said, not replace me. She looked away. David turned a page in his folder. There were also internal service notes connected to these submissions. Lauren's head snapped up. David, he raised one hand. Mrs. Sanders has a right to understand what was entered in connection with her profile. Janet read from the printed record. Customer may be experiencing age-related confusion. Daughter assists with financial organization. Recommend family contact be included to prevent missed notices. I felt the words land one by one. Age-related confusion. Daughter assists. Family contact. Not once did it say, Tiffany Sanders says. Tiffany Sanders requests. Tiffany Sanders agrees. I had been reduced to a condition. Lauren leaned forward. Those were not meant to hurt you. No, I said. They were meant to convince other people. Her mouth opened, then closed. David looked at Lauren. Did you enter that note? She swallowed. I entered a note after a conversation with my mother. What conversation? Lauren glanced at me. She had misplaced an insurance form. I stared at her. I found that form the next day. But you did misplace it, and that was enough for you to write age-related confusion in a bank record. It was not just that. What else? She looked trapped now. You forget appointments, she said. You repeat questions. You leave mail stacked everywhere. You still keep blank checks in the house. I am 68, Lauren. I am not dead. That's not fair. No, I said, my voice rising before I could stop it. What is not fair is a daughter turning ordinary aging into a case against her mother. The room went still. I was breathing hard. I had never yelled in a bank before. I had rarely raised my voice anywhere. Robert used to say my anger did not come out like thunder. It came out like a door closing quietly. But that morning, the door did not close quietly. Lauren's eyes filled again. I was scared. Of what? She did not answer. I knew then there was more. Fear can make people controlling, yes. But the papers in front of me were not just fear. They were steps, organized steps. She had not simply worried. She had built a trail. Janet pulled up something on her laptop. We also reviewed submission timing, she said. Some of these forms were initiated outside normal customer-facing appointments. David's gaze shifted to Lauren. My daughter went very still. What does that mean? I asked. Janet chose her words carefully. It means certain documents were entered into the system using internal access, not through a standard in-person customer request. I turned to Lauren. You did this from inside the bank, Lauren whispered. That makes it sound worse than it was. Then make it sound honest. Her eyes met mine. For a second, I thought she might break. I thought she might finally say, Yes, Mom. I crossed a line. I am sorry. I was wrong. Instead, she said, Mark was worried too. There it was. Mark. His name entered the room like smoke under a door. David leaned forward. Was Mark Whitaker involved in completing or submitting these documents? Lauren shook her head too quickly. No, not submitting. He just helped me think through what needed to be done. What needed to be done, I repeated. She looked at me. Mom, you don't know the pressure we've been under. What pressure? Her lips pressed together. Janet placed one more page on the table. Before we move into motive, there is something else. It was a still image printed from security footage, grainy black and white taken from a high corner of the bank. I could see a teller counter, a small service desk, and a woman standing there with a folder in her hands. Lauren, not Mark, not some stranger. Lauren. My daughter stared at the image as if she could will it to disappear. Janet said, This shows Mrs. Whitaker submitting paperwork at the side service station on May 14th at 4:46 p.m. I remembered that date because Lauren had called me that evening and asked if I was feeling okay. She had sounded sweet, concerned. I had told her I was making chicken soup and watching an old movie. She had said, Good, just rest, Mom. While I was resting, she had been standing inside the bank with a folder carrying my name. Lauren spoke quickly. That wasn't all of it. Some of those were drafts. I was asking about process. David said the timestamp corresponds with documents later scanned to Mrs. Sanders' profile, but not approved, because they were flagged. That word seemed to drain the last bit of color from her face. flagged, so she had not stopped herself. The bank had stopped her. I looked at the printed image, then at the woman sitting across from me. I searched her face for my little girl again, and found only fragments. The curve of her cheek, the shape of her eyes, the way her mouth trembled when she was cornered. "Did you think I would never come here?" I asked. Lauren wiped her tears, but her voice had sharpened. "Honestly, I thought if you did, you'd let me explain." "You mean control the conversation? I mean protect you from misunderstanding." "Stop using that word." "What word?" "Protect." She stared at me. I pointed to the forms. "This is not protection." Then to the security image. "That is not protection." Then to the internal note. "That is not protection." My voice broke. "That is betrayal wearing my daughter's face." Lauren covered her mouth with both hands. For a moment I thought she would sob. Instead, she lowered her hands and said something I will never forget. "You don't understand what it feels like to watch you sit on everything we need." The room went silent. David's expression changed. Janet stopped typing, and I felt the whole truth shift closer. Everything we need. Not everything you need, Mom. Not everything that keeps you safe. Everything we need. I sat back slowly. I said. Lauren's face showed instant regret. I looked at David. "There is more, isn't there?" He did not answer right away. That was answer enough. Janet closed one folder and opened another. This one had fewer pages, but David's face hardened when he saw it. Lauren began shaking her head before anyone spoke. "No," she whispered. "Please don't." I had never heard my daughter beg a bank manager before. David looked at me with quiet sympathy. "Mrs. Sanders," he said, "we need to talk about a proposed transfer request." My hand went to Robert's ring beneath my blouse. "How much?" Janet looked down at the page. "Not a completed transfer," she said. "A proposed movement of funds tied to a collateral review." Collateral. The word meant little to me at first. Then I remembered Mark on my porch talking about equity. People my age sitting on assets, making assets work for the whole family. I looked at Lauren. She would not meet my eyes. "What were you trying to use as collateral?" I asked. No one spoke. Not Janet, not David, not Lauren. And in that silence, I understood that my bank account had only been the first door. They had been looking for a way to reach the house. For a moment, no one in that room moved. The word collateral seemed to hang over the table heavy and unfamiliar, like something that belonged in someone else's life. I knew the basic meaning. Robert and I had taken out loans before. We had signed papers for the house for the old Buick for Lauren's college expenses when the scholarships did not stretch far enough. Collateral meant you put something up so the bank could take it if you failed. But I had never imagined that something might be me, or my home. I looked at David Brooks, hoping he would tell me I had misunderstood. His face told me he wished he could. "What collateral?" I asked again. Janet drew a measured breath. There was a preliminary inquiry attached to a credit restructuring discussion. It referenced assets belonging to a family member. Lauren's hands flew up slightly. It was not an application. David turned to her. "No one said it was approved, but you're making it sound like I tried to steal her house." My whole body went cold. Her house. Not Mom's house. Her house. The way Lauren said it was meant to deny the accusation, but it revealed too much. Until that second, David and Janet had not used the word house. I had not used it either. Lauren had. I stared at her. David noticed. So did Janet. "Mrs. Whitaker," David said slowly. "What house are you referring to?" Lauren's mouth opened. No sound came out. The silence answered for her. I placed one hand against the edge of the table because the room seemed to tilt. My house was not just property. It was the place where Robert carried Lauren over the threshold when we brought her home from the hospital. It was the place where I had cooked Thanksgiving dinners for 38 years. It was the place where Robert took his last nap in the recliner by the front window before the ambulance came. My house was the last life Robert and I still shared. I looked at my daughter. You were going to use my home? She shook her head, but the movement was weak. No. Not like that. How do you use someone's home, not leak that, Mom, please? No. Explain it. I looked at my daughter. You were going to use my home. She shook her head, but the movement was weak. No. Not like that. How do you use someone's home, not like that, Mom, please? No. Explain it. She glanced at David as if he might save her from me. He did not. Lauren swallowed. Mark had some business issues, temporary ones. We were looking at options. Options? I repeated. It was just a discussion. With whom? She said nothing. Janet looked down at the file. The inquiry was not completed through this bank, but references to external credit review were included in notes uploaded with the profile documents. David's face hardened. That is part of why the account was locked for review. I turned slowly toward him. You knew this before I came in. He folded his hands. We knew enough to be concerned, but without your direct confirmation, we could not discuss the full matter with anyone else. Because of Robert? Janet said softly. At the sound of my husband's name, my breath caught. David glanced at her, then back at me. Mrs. Sanders, there is something we should have explained earlier, but I wanted to establish the current documents first. Lauren closed her eyes. I looked at him. What did Robert do? David's expression changed. The manager disappeared for a moment, and I saw the man who had stood beside Robert at the bank counter years ago speaking to him with respect. I had forgotten until then how many times Robert had come home from errands and said, I talked with Dave at the bank. Good man, straight shooter. David opened a separate folder. This was set up by Mr. Sanders before his passing, he said. It is not a legal trust in the way an attorney would describe one, but it is an internal protection instruction attached to certain accounts and customer profile actions. I leaned forward. David slid a copy of a memo toward me. It had Robert's name on it. Robert A. Sanders. The sight of his handwriting in the margin nearly broke me. Janet spoke gently. Your husband requested enhanced verification protocols. Any major profile change, access change, large transfer, or collateral-related inquiry involving your accounts or linked financial records had to be confirmed directly with you in person. I stared at the page. Robert had signed it 4 months before he died. I remembered that period. He had grown thinner by then. His hands shook when he buttoned his shirt, though he tried to hide it. He had started insisting on running certain errands alone, telling me he wanted fresh air, or needed to talk to someone about insurance. I had thought he was being stubborn. I had teased him for refusing to let illness slow him down. All that time, he had been protecting me. David continued. He was very clear. He said that after he was gone, no one was to make significant changes on your behalf without you sitting across from a bank officer and confirming it yourself. My vision blurred. What exactly did he say? I whispered. David's eyes softened. He said, My wife trusts the people she loves. That is her best quality and her biggest risk. A sound escaped me before I could stop it. Not quite a sob, not quite a laugh. Robert, even dying, he had seen me clearly. Lauren turned her face away. I looked down at the memo again. In the notes section, there was a line written in Robert's steady hand, Tiffany must be asked directly. Do not accept family pressure as consent. I pressed my fingertips to those words. Do not accept family pressure as consent. He had known. Maybe not everything. Maybe not the full shape of what Lauren and Mark would try. But he had sensed enough. Robert had never trusted Mark's smooth talk. He had never liked the way Mark used the word leverage, never liked the way he glanced around our house as if mentally pricing the walls. And maybe heartbreakingly, he had seen something changing in Lauren before I did. I wiped my eyes. Why didn't he tell me? David was quiet for a moment. I can't answer for him, but I remember he was worried you would refuse extra protection if you thought it meant he didn't trust the family. That was exactly what I would have done. I would have defended Lauren. I would have told Robert he was being too suspicious. I would have said, family helps family. I had said those things for years. Lauren spoke suddenly. Dad had no right to do that behind my back. The room changed. Slowly, I lifted my head. David's brows drew together. Janet stopped typing. Even Lauren seemed to realize too late that she had said the wrong thing. Behind your back, I asked. She looked at me, tears still on her face, but now there was resentment under them. He always treated me like I was irresponsible. Like Mark wasn't good enough. Like I couldn't handle anything. Your father was trying to protect me. From his own daughter? Yes, I said. The word came out before I could soften it. Lauren recoiled, and I let it stand. There had been a time I would have chased that word, wrapped it in apology, explained it until it no longer had teeth. Not anymore. Sometimes truth needs to arrive sharp enough to cut the rope around your own throat. David touched the memo lightly. Mrs. Sanders, because of this instruction, the system triggered additional review when multiple profile changes began appearing in a short period. That is why the letter was generated. That is why Melissa told you to come in. And that is why nothing major was processed. I closed my eyes. The opened envelope. Linda's warning. My shaking hands on the phone. Lauren calling me ma'am. All of it had led me here. But Robert had started the path years before. He saved me? I whispered. Janet nodded. He gave the bank a reason to stop and ask. I looked at Lauren. She stared at the table. For the first time that morning, she did not look clever polished or in control. She looked small, but I could not tell whether she was small from shame or because her plan had failed. What did Mark owe? I asked. Lauren's head jerked up. This isn't about Mark. It became about Mark the moment my home became an option. Her face twisted. You don't know what it's like to have everything falling apart. You're right, I said. I only know what it's like to bury a husband, live alone, and find out my child tried to use my grief as paperwork. David lowered his gaze. Lauren's eyes filled again, but I saw anger there too. Mark made some investments, she said finally. A development project. It was supposed to turn around fast. How much? She shook her head. How much, Lauren? Enough, she whispered. That is not an answer. She looked toward the blinds, toward the thin lines of sunlight on the wall. Almost 200,000. My breath left me. $200,000. I thought of the coupons I had clipped for her school shoes, the extra jobs Robert took, the years we had lived carefully so we would never owe more than we could bear. And now my daughter had sat across from strangers and tried to maneuver around my authority because her husband had gambled with money he did not have. Were you going to ask me? I said. Lauren wiped her cheek. You would have said no. I felt my chest ache. So you decided my no didn't matter? She looked at me then, and I saw the truth before she spoke. I decided you didn't understand what was at stake. There it was. No apology, no real remorse. Just the belief that her desperation outranked my consent. David closed the protection memo and slid it back into the folder. Mrs. Whitaker, I need you to understand that this matter will be reviewed internally. Your employment role complicates the situation significantly. Lauren's face went pale again. David, please. I have a son. So does Mrs. Sanders have a grandson, he said. That does not change policy. She turned to me. Mom, say something. I almost laughed from the cruelty of it. When I had tried to speak as her mother in the lobby, she had called me ma'am. Now when her job was in danger, she wanted Mom back. I looked down at Robert's note again. Tiffany must be asked directly, so I answered directly. I will not lie for you. Lauren's face collapsed. And even then, even after everything, a part of me wanted to reach across the table and comfort her. That is the terrible strength of motherhood. Your child can wound you, and some instinct still reaches for the bandage. But I kept my hands in my lap. David stood. We're going to secure Mrs. Sanders' accounts today. Janet will walk through the immediate protections. I nodded, though I felt hollowed out. Janet began listing steps. Freeze pending changes, reset contact preferences, remove unauthorized recovery options, require in-person verification, flag any external inquiry referencing my assets. Her words became a kind of fence around me. For months, Lauren had been building a cage. Now, piece by piece, the bank was building a boundary. When the meeting ended, Lauren remained seated. She looked at the table shoulders trembling. I stood slowly gathering my purse and documents. At the door, she finally spoke. Mom. I stopped. The words sounded different now. Smaller, needy. I turned. Lauren's eyes were red. What happens now? I looked at her for a long moment. I go home, I said, and I find out what else you and Mark have touched. Her face told me there was more before her mouth ever could. And as I walked out of that closed conference room, holding Robert's protection memo against my chest, I understood something I had not wanted to believe. The bank had stopped the first theft. But my house was still waiting for me. I left the conference room with David Brooks on one side of me and Janet Coleman walking a few steps behind. Lauren did not follow right away. Maybe she needed to gather herself. Maybe David had quietly told her to stay seated. Maybe she simply could not stand yet under the weight of what had been said. I did not turn back to check. If I had seen her crying, I might have weakened, and I could not afford to weaken. Not when my name, my accounts, and possibly my home had just been dragged into something I still did not fully understand. At the front of the bank, the lobby looked ordinary again. People stood in line. A teller counted bills. A young mother bounced a baby on her hip while waiting at the service desk. Life kept moving, even when mine had cracked wide open. David guided me to a smaller office near the back. Mrs. Sanders, he said, we can take immediate steps today. I nodded, though my mind was still stuck on the word Lauren had said. We. Everything we need. Not once had Lauren said, what you need, Mom. Not once had she asked whether I felt safe, whether I understood, whether I wanted help. She and Mark had already decided what my assets were supposed to become in their emergency. A solution, a bridge, a rescue rope for a hole they had dug without me. Janet sat beside a computer and began reviewing each protection measure. My mailing address would be confirmed. My paper statements would be restored. My phone number would be the only number used for verification. My online access would be reset completely. No external request connected to my profile would proceed without direct in-person approval. Any inquiry referencing my assets, my house, my accounts, or my old authorization would be flagged. The words were technical, but they felt like locks clicking back into place. As Janet worked, David asked me to sign a few forms confirming what I had not authorized. My signature shook on the first page. On the second, it steadied. By the third, I wrote my name slowly and clearly, pressing the pen into the paper, as if I were carving myself back into my own life. Tiffany Sanders. Not Lauren's version of it. Mine. When we finished, David sat across from me and removed his glasses. "There's one more thing I need to say," he told me. I looked up. Lauren's employment situation will be reviewed internally. I can't discuss details with you beyond what affects your account, but I don't want you to feel responsible for that process. Responsible. The word hit a tender place. A mother can be betrayed and still feel guilty for the consequences that reach her child. That is one of the cruelest traps of family. Lauren had put me in danger, yet some part of me still wanted to ask whether she would lose her job, whether Ethan would be hurt, whether Mark would blame her, whether I had done too much by telling the truth. David seemed to see that struggle on my face. "Mrs. Sanders," he said gently, "protecting yourself is not the same as punishing her." I closed my eyes for a moment. Robert would have liked David Brooks. No Robert had liked him. That thought brought another ache. "I don't want my daughter destroyed," I said. "I understand, but I also don't want to be destroyed to keep her comfortable." David nodded slowly. "That is a very important distinction." When I stepped out of the office, Lauren was standing near the hallway, arms folded tightly around herself. Her eyes were swollen, but her face had hardened again. She looked less like a daughter, waiting for her mother, and more like a person waiting to see what damage had been done. "Mom," she said. I stopped, but I did not move toward her. David remained nearby, close enough to hear if voices rose. Lauren glanced at him, then lowered her tone. "Can we talk outside?" "No." Her mouth tightened. "You're really going to do this here?" "Do what?" "Humiliate me." I almost laughed. The sound rose in my throat and died there. "You called me ma'am in front of an entire bank lobby," I said. "Do not speak to me about humiliation." She looked away. For one brief second, shame crossed her face. Then desperation overtook it. "You don't understand what's happening with Mark." "I understand enough." "No, you don't." Her voice trembled. "He made a bad investment. It got out of control. People are calling. There are letters. He could lose everything. Then Mark should have come to me honestly." Lauren's eyes flashed. "You would have judged him?" "I would have asked questions." "That's the same thing to him." "Then he wanted my money, not my help." She flinched, as if I had struck her. I stepped closer, keeping my voice low. "Tell me the truth. Were you going to use my house as collateral?" Her lips parted. She looked toward David again. He said nothing. "Lauren, I said I am asking you as your mother. Not as a bank customer, not as a confused old woman, not as a problem. Were you and Mark trying to use my house?" Her eyes filled with tears. It wasn't supposed to go that far. That answer told me it had already gone farther than she wanted to admit. My legs felt weak, but I stayed standing. "How far?" She wiped at her cheek angrily. "There were discussions. Mark knew someone who could look at options. Nothing was final." "Options with my home. With your equity," she said, as if using a cleaner word could make it less dirty. "My home," I repeated. She swallowed. "You don't even have a mortgage anymore. Do you know how rare that is? Do you know what that could do for this family?" "This family." I stared at her. "That house became mortgage-free because your father worked with pain in his chest and never told me how bad it was. Because I worked jobs I hated and wore shoes until the sole split. Because we went without things so you could have them. I know that." "No," I said. "You know the result. You do not respect the sacrifice." Her face twisted. "That's not fair." "What is not fair?" is you deciding that the life your father and I built belongs to everyone, except the woman still living in it. For a moment, Lauren looked furious. Truly furious. Then the anger cracked. I was scared. What is not fair is you deciding that the life your father and I built belongs to everyone except the woman still living in it. For a moment, Lauren looked furious, truly furious. Then the anger cracked. I was scared, she said. I am scared. Mark keeps saying if we don't fix this, we'll lose the house. Ethan will have to change schools. Everything will fall apart. And you thought the solution was to make my life fall apart instead. She covered her mouth. I saw the answer in her silence. Lauren had not wanted to think of it that way. People rarely name their own selfishness honestly. They wrap it in necessity. Family, crisis, protection, planning. But beneath all those words was one simple truth: she had decided my stability was less important than hers. David took a step forward. Mrs. Whitaker, this conversation should pause until you have representation or HR present. Lauren turned on him. This is my mother, and this is a banking matter involving potentially unauthorized activity, David said. His tone made it clear the conversation was over. Lauren looked back at me quickly, panic returning. Mom, please, don't let them make this official. It became official when my name appeared on forms I didn't sign. I never meant to hurt you. You meant to use me. That's not true. Then why didn't you ask? She shook her head, crying now. Because you would have said no. There it was again, the heart of it. My no had become an obstacle to work around. I looked at my daughter, and something inside me mourned, as if she had died and was still standing in front of me. I would have said no to risking my home, I said, but I might have said yes to helping you find a lawyer. I might have said yes to watching Ethan while you got a second job. I might have said yes to sitting down with Grace Mitchell and figuring out a legal way to help without putting myself in danger. But you did not want help, Lauren. You wanted access. She cried harder. I did not move to comfort her. That was the hardest thing I did that day. Not signing forms, not facing the forged signature, not hearing about collateral. The hardest thing was letting my daughter cry without handing her my safety to make the crying stop. David asked if I wanted someone to drive me home. I almost said no out of pride, but then I remembered how badly my hands had shaken that morning. Pride had its place. So did wisdom. I'll call Linda, I said. Lauren's head lifted. You told Linda. She told me to check my bank account myself. Lauren's expression darkened. Of course she did. Do not blame the woman who warned me because you were hoping I wouldn't notice. She looked stunned, maybe because I had never spoken that plainly before. I called Linda from the bank lobby. She answered on the second ring. Tiffany, I need a ride home. I said. There was no hesitation. I'm on my way. While I waited, I sat in a chair near the window, clutching my purse in my lap. Lauren remained near the hallway, speaking quietly with David and Janet. Once she looked over at me. I looked back. For the first time in my life, I did not wonder how to make my daughter feel better. I wondered what she might do next. Linda arrived in 12 minutes, wearing a red cardigan and the expression of a woman prepared to fight the entire bank if needed. She took one look at my face and softened. Oh, honey. Those 2 words nearly broke me. I stood, and she put one arm around me. As we walked toward the exit, Lauren stepped forward. Mom, can I come by tonight? I stopped. Every old habit in me wanted to say yes. Come over. We'll talk. I'll make tea. We'll fix this because mothers are supposed to fix things. But then I saw the forms again. The fake signature. The internal note. Robert's warning. "No," I said. Lauren's lips trembled. "Tomorrow. I will call you when I am ready. That could be too late." I looked at her for a long moment. For once I said, "You will have to wait on my decision." Then I walked out. Linda drove me home in silence for the first few minutes. She did not ask questions. That was one of the reasons I loved her. Some people try to fill pain with words. Linda knew when to let a person breathe. When my house came into view, I felt relief for half a second. Then I saw the front porch. Nothing was broken. Nothing looked wrong from the street. The maple tree swayed gently. The blue shutters were still bright against the white siding. Robert's porch rail still leaned slightly to the left. But the moment I stepped inside, I knew. A house has a feeling when someone has been inside it without love. The air was too still. The drawer in the hall table was open. A corner of the rug near the stairs was folded back. The door to my small office was not fully closed. I set my purse down slowly. Linda saw my face. "What?" I walked to the office. The bottom drawer of my desk was open. The file folders were shifted. The deed folder was missing. And on the floor beside the printer, half hidden beneath the wastebasket, was a page with the name Ashley Bennett Real Estate across the top. My hand shook as I picked it up. "Scheduled valuation consultation. Property 214 Maple Ridge Lane. Owner status transitioning to assisted living." I read the line twice. Assisted living. I had never agreed to sell my house. I had never agreed to leave my home. Linda stood beside me, her voice low and fierce. "Tiffany, call your lawyer." I looked around the little office Robert had painted pale yellow because he said it made paperwork less depressing. Then I looked back at the page in my hand. The bank had closed one door. But Lauren and Mark had already opened another. Linda reached for the paper before I realized my hand was still shaking. "Let me see that," she said. I gave it to her because I could not bear to read the words again. Owner status transitioning to assisted living. The sentence had a politeness to it that made it even uglier. It did not say forced out. It did not say tricked. It did not say daughter and son-in-law planning behind her back. It dressed betrayal in clean real estate language and made my disappearance sound like a scheduled life event. Linda read the page slowly. Her mouth tightened with every line. "This has Ashley Bennett's office number on it," she said. "I don't know any Ashley Bennett. She's a realtor," Linda replied. "I've seen her signs over near the Methodist church. Expensive hair, big smile. Sells renovated homes to people who use words like charming when they mean overpriced." Under other circumstances, I might have laughed. That day, I could barely breathe. I stood in the middle of my little office, staring at the empty place in the desk drawer, where my deed folder should have been. The pale yellow walls seemed too bright. Robert had painted that room the year after Lauren graduated college. He said every woman needed a place in her own house where she could shut the door and think. I had used it for bills, letters, birthday cards, and prayer lists. Now it looked searched, not ransacked. That would have been easier to understand. Ransacked would mean a burglar. This was worse. The folders had been moved carefully. The drawers had been opened and pushed mostly shut. Someone had tried to leave everything looking normal enough that an old woman might doubt herself. I was starting to understand how much of Lauren's plan depended on that. Doubt. "Check what else is missing," Linda said. Her voice had changed. She was no longer just my neighbor. She sounded like a woman taking command in a storm. I opened the bottom drawer again. The folder marked house. Her voice had changed. She was no longer just my neighbor. She sounded like a woman taking command in a storm. I opened the bottom drawer again. The folder marked house deed and tax records was gone. The insurance folder was there, but thinner than before. My copy of Robert's final estate summary was missing. A folder containing old appraisal notices had been shifted forward. Linda knelt beside the wastebasket and pulled out 2 crumpled sheets. One was a printout from a senior living facility about 10 miles away. Maple Grove Assisted Living. The other was a page of handwritten notes. At first, I did not recognize the handwriting. Then I did. Lauren's, mom resistant, emphasize safety, stairs concern, loneliness concern, house maintenance concern, doctor capacity. I read the last line 3 times. Doctor capacity. She was still trying to build the record, I whispered. Linda's eyes softened. Tiffany, I sat down in the office chair because my knees gave out. I had thought the bank was the heart of it. The forms, the signatures, the access, the account profile. But those were only tools. The true plan had been larger, older, and colder than I wanted to believe. Lauren and Mark had been preparing to move me out of my own life. The phone rang. I jumped so hard, Linda reached for my shoulder. It was my landline. Hardly anyone called that number anymore except church friends, medical offices, and telemarketers. I looked toward the hallway where the ringing echoed through the house. For a second, I could not move. Linda went to the phone, checked the caller ID, and looked back at me. Ashley Bennett Realty. My heart dropped. Answer it, Linda said quietly. Put it on speaker. I shook my head. I can't. Yes, you can. I stood on legs that felt borrowed and walked to the phone. I pressed the speaker button. Hello, a cheerful woman's voice filled the hallway. Good afternoon. This is Ashley Bennett calling for Lauren Whitaker. I'm just confirming tomorrow's preliminary valuation appointment for 214 Maple Ridge Lane. Linda's eyes narrowed. I swallowed. This is Tiffany Sanders. There was a small pause. Oh. Mrs. Sanders. Wonderful. I didn't expect to reach you directly. I live here. Another pause. Shorter this time. Yes, of course. Lauren mentioned you were beginning a transition and that the family wanted to explore options. A transition to what? The cheer in Ashley's voice thinned. My understanding was assisted living, but of course I would discuss everything with you before any listing steps. Did I request this appointment? Well, Lauren contacted me on behalf of the family. On behalf of me. I was told she was assisting you. Linda folded her arms, her face furious. I gripped the edge of the small phone table. Ms. Bennett, I have not agreed to sell my home. I have not agreed to a valuation. I have not agreed to move into assisted living. Silence. When Ashley spoke again, her voice was more careful. I'm very sorry, Mrs. Sanders. I was given the impression this was a family-supported process. That is not an answer. No, ma'am. You did not personally contact me. Did anyone send you documents with my name on them? There was a longer pause. I received a preliminary seller information form. My stomach turned. Signed, I would need to review the file before answering that accurately. Did anyone send you documents with my name on them? There was a longer pause. I received a preliminary seller information form. My stomach turned. Signed, I would need to review the file before answering that accurately. Review it now. Linda's eyebrows lifted, but she said nothing. Ashley hesitated. Mrs. Sanders, I think it may be best if I pause this matter until I verify authorization. You do that? I said. And you send me copies of anything you received with my name on it. I can send them to the email on file. I did not give you an email. The one provided by Lauren. No, I said louder than I expected. You will mail hard copies to this house addressed to me, Tiffany Sanders, and you will not speak to Lauren or Mark Whitaker about my property again unless I am present or my attorney contacts you. The word attorney seemed to change the temperature of the call. Yes, Mrs. Sanders, Ashley said. I understand. I hung up before my courage could drain away. Linda stared at me. Well, she said, there she is. Who the woman Robert married? That broke me. I covered my face with both hands, and the sob came from somewhere deep. Not a delicate cry. Not the kind you can wipe away with a tissue and pretend did not happen. It was the sound of a person realizing how close she had come to being quietly removed. Linda put her arms around me and held on. For several minutes, I cried for all of it. For Robert, for the daughter I thought I had, for the house that suddenly felt vulnerable, for every time Lauren had called me confused while she was the one moving things behind my back, for every older woman who had ever been told that needing help meant surrendering control. When the crying passed, it left something behind. Not peace, a sharper thing. I went back into the office and picked up the assisted living brochure. On the cover was a smiling gray-haired woman watering flowers under a headline about comfort and care. I wondered if Lauren had imagined showing me that brochure at the kitchen table. Maybe she would have used her soft voice. Maybe Mark would have stood by the coffee maker talking about safety and convenience. Maybe they would have framed it as a gift. A smaller place, Mom. Less responsibility. More support. And once I was softened enough, confused enough, tired enough, maybe they would slide over papers. I looked at Linda. I need to change the locks. Today, she said. I need to call Grace Mitchell. Now, Grace Mitchell had been Robert's and my attorney for years. She was in her early 60s with silver-streaked brown hair and a voice that could make careless people sit up straighter. She had handled Robert's estate after he died. She was the one who had insisted that temporary authorizations be revoked when they were no longer necessary. I found her number in my old address book. My hands were steadier now. Her receptionist answered first. When I said my name and explained that it was urgent, I was put on hold for less than 30 seconds. Tiffany Grace's voice came on the line. What happened? I closed my eyes. Hearing someone who knew Robert, someone who knew me before I became a file to be managed, nearly made me cry again. I think Lauren and Mark tried to use my bank account, I said, and now I think they're trying to sell my house. Grace did not gasp. She did not waste time with shock. Are you safe right now? Yes, Linda is with me. Good. Do not let Lauren was with me. Good. Do not let Lauren or Mark inside the house. Do not discuss documents with them over the phone. Photograph everything you found. Put the papers in a folder. I want you in my office tomorrow morning at 9. I'm scared or Mark inside the house. Do not discuss documents with them over the phone. Photograph everything you found. Put the papers in a folder. I want you in my office tomorrow morning at 9. I'm scared, I admitted. I know, Grace said, but listen to me carefully. Fear is not a reason to surrender. It is a reason to document. I wrote that down because it sounded like something I would need to remember. After we hung up, Linda helped me take pictures of the open drawers, the missing folder space, the real estate paper, the assisted living brochure, and Lauren's handwritten notes. Then she called her nephew, who owned a locksmith business. He came before sunset and changed the front, back, and side door locks while I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea going cold between my hands. As he worked, I noticed something else. The spare key that used to hang inside the little rooster-shaped key cabinet by the pantry was gone. Lauren's key, or Mark's. I could not know which one had been used, only that someone had used it. That evening, just as the locksmith left, my cell phone buzzed. Lauren. I stared at the screen until it stopped. Then Mark called. I let it ring. Then a text came from Lauren. Mom, we need to talk before you do something you can't undo. I read it aloud to Linda. She snorted. That girl has nerve. A second text followed. Please don't involve lawyers. This is a family matter. I looked around my kitchen, the folder on the table, the changed locks, Robert's empty chair, the house they had already begun discussing as if I had agreed to leave it. A family matter. For a long time, those words would have worked on me. They would have made me ashamed to tell anyone. They would have made me choose silence to protect the family name. Not anymore. I typed one sentence back. All future communication about my finances or my home will go through Grace Mitchell. My finger hovered over send. Then I pressed it. Within seconds, Lauren called again. I turned the phone face down. Outside, the sun was setting behind the maple tree Robert planted when Lauren was born. The branches moved gently in the wind, tapping the window like fingers. For the first time all day, I did not feel alone. I had Linda next to me. I had Grace waiting in the morning. I had Robert's protection memo in my purse. I had new locks on my doors, and most importantly, I had finally stopped asking whether my daughter meant to hurt me. Now I was asking how to stop her from doing it again. I did not sleep much that night. Every sound in the house seemed louder than it had ever been. The furnace clicking on, the old floorboards settling, a branch scraping lightly against the upstairs window. For years, those sounds had been ordinary. They were the language of home. But after finding Lauren's notes and the missing deed folder, every noise made me wonder if someone was outside, if someone still had another key, if Mark would come pounding on the door once he realized I had involved Grace Mitchell. I kept my cell phone on the nightstand with the ringer off. Lauren called 7 times. Mark called 3. Neither of them left a voicemail. That told me something. People who have innocent explanations leave messages. People who want control keep ringing until you pick up. Around 2 a.m, I got out of bed, put on Robert's old flannel robe, and walked downstairs. The house was dark except for the small lamp above the stove. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the chair where Robert used to sit with his coffee. For a moment, I could almost see him there, one hand wrapped around his mug, his brows drawn together the way they always did when he was thinking hard. "You were right," I whispered. The words hurt, not because Robert was right about protecting me, but because I had spent so long not wanting him to be. I had mistaken suspicion for bitterness. I had believed that family love could stay pure if I simply trusted enough. But trust without boundaries is not love. It is an unlocked door. At 8:30 the next morning, Linda drove me to Grace Mitchell's office. Grace worked out of a renovated brick building on Main Street, above a small accounting firm and across from the county courthouse. Her office always smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. Robert used to say Grace had the kind of office where people told the truth even if they had planned not to. When I walked in carrying 2 folders, my purse, Robert's protection memo, and a fear I could barely hide, Grace was already waiting near the reception desk. She was in her early 60s, tall with silver-streaked brown hair pinned at the back of her head. She wore a dark green suit and no-nonsense glasses. When she saw me, her expression softened, but only for a second. Then she became all business. "Tiffany," she said, taking both my hands. "Come in." Linda started to sit in the waiting room, but I reached for her sleeve. "Please stay." Grace nodded. "That's wise. A witness and a friend are both useful." In her office, I spread everything across the conference table. The bank letter, the doctor's note, the revocation of Lauren's temporary authorization. Photos of my open drawers, the assisted living brochure, the real estate appointment page, Lauren's handwritten notes, the text messages, the number of missed calls, Robert's internal bank protection memo. Grace reviewed each item without interrupting me. That was one of her gifts. She did not gasp in the wrong places or fill silence with pity. She let facts gather weight. When I finished explaining, my throat felt raw. Grace removed her glasses and placed them on the table. "This is not a misunderstanding," she said. I closed my eyes. Part of me had still been waiting for someone to say the opposite. Linda reached under the table and squeezed my hand. Grace continued. "The banking issue alone is serious. The property issue may be worse because it suggests planning beyond account access. We need to secure your legal position immediately." "What does that mean?" "It means we verify the deed, check county records, notify the realtor in writing, notify the bank in writing, through counsel, and formally revoke any remaining permissions that Lauren or Mark might claim to have. We also document that you do not consent to any sale transfer, lien loan valuation, assisted living transition, or family representation regarding your property." Hearing it all listed so plainly made me feel both safer and sicker. "How could she do this?" I asked. Grace's face softened again. "That question may matter to your heart. Right now, it cannot lead the strategy." I looked at her. She leaned forward. "Tiffany, I am going to say this carefully. When adult children financially pressure aging parents, they often rely on shame and silence. They count on the parent not wanting to expose the family. They count on love becoming hesitation. You cannot afford hesitation right now." The words landed hard. Love becoming hesitation. That was exactly what Lauren had used. Grace turned to her computer and logged into the county property records portal. She asked for my address, then typed quickly. Linda and I sat side by side, waiting. I watched Grace's face. Lawyers learn not to react too much, but after a minute, her brow tightened. "What?" I asked. "The deed is still in your name," she said. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. But Grace added there was a recent search request and a downloaded copy from the public record system. "Can anyone do that?" "Yes, property records are generally public, but combined with everything else, it supports that someone was preparing documents." "Can they sell my house without the original deed?" "No," Grace said firmly. "Not legally. The original deed folder being missing is concerning, but the recorded ownership is what matters. You are the owner of record. They cannot legally sell mortgage or transfer this property without your valid signature and notarized consent." Valid signature. I thought of the bank form with my name copied poorly at the bottom. What if they fake it? Grace's face hardened. Then they turn a civil mess into a criminal one, Linda murmured. "Good." Grace looked at me. "Your late husband did something very smart. The bank memo helps show that concerns about family pressure existed before this crisis. It may not control property law directly, but it supports your position that you were to be consulted directly and protected from unauthorized family action." Robert's care reached across death again, and I had to blink back tears. Grace printed several documents. Then she opened a blank letter on her computer and began typing. "What are you writing?" I asked. "A notice to Ashley Bennett Real Estate. It will state that you have not authorized any valuation listing representation, assisted living, transition seller form, or communication through Lauren or Mark. It will require preservation of all documents received." Preservation. So nothing conveniently disappears. The way she said it made Linda nod with satisfaction. Then Grace drafted a second letter to Cedar Falls Community Bank, confirming that she represented me, that all pending unauthorized activity was disputed, and that all communications about suspicious documents should be preserved. The third document was for Lauren and Mark. That one made my stomach twist. Grace read the opening paragraph aloud. "Dear Mrs. Whitaker and Mr. Whitaker, please be advised that this office represents Tiffany Sanders regarding all financial property and authorization matters. You are not authorized to access, represent, list, pledge, transfer, borrow against, or otherwise act concerning Mrs. Sanders' accounts, residence, legal documents, or personal property." My hands grew cold. It sounds so official, I said. It needs to. She's still my daughter. Grace turned from the screen and looked at me gently. Yes, and that is why the letter is going to be hard for her to receive. But Tiffany being someone's mother does not make you their emergency fund, their collateral, or their backup plan. I looked down at my lap. For 68 years, I had known who I was in relation to other people. Robert's wife, Lauren's mother, Ethan's grandmother, church volunteer, neighbor, friend. But somewhere in all that giving, I had misplaced the simpler truth. I was also mine. My safety mattered even when my daughter was crying. My home mattered even when Mark was in debt. My no mattered even when it disappointed people I loved. Grace printed the letters and had me read them. My eyes caught on my name each time. Tiffany Sanders. It looked strong in black ink. After we signed the representation agreement, Grace asked, "Do you have a current will?" "Yes. Robert and I updated it years ago, but not recently. We need to review it." I felt a fresh wave of exhaustion. Today? Not all of it today, but soon. Lauren may have expected to benefit from confusion delay or outdated paperwork. We removed those openings. Linda spoke up. "What about Ethan?" At the sound of my grandson's name, my heart clenched. Grace looked at me. "That will be your decision. We can protect Ethan separately if you want to provide for him without giving Lauren or Mark control." I nodded quickly. "Yes, he's only a child. None of this is his fault." Then, well, plan for that. For the first time since walking into the bank, I felt something like steadiness. Not happiness, not peace, but ground beneath my feet. Grace scheduled a formal meeting for the following week. She wanted David Brooks and Janet Coleman present if the bank agreed. She wanted Lauren and Mark invited through written notice, not phone calls. She wanted all documents placed on the table at once. "Will they come?" I asked. "They will if they understand what ignoring the meeting could cost them." "And if they don't?" Grace's voice was calm. "Then we proceed without their cooperation." Before leaving, I asked to use Grace's copier. I made copies of everything, placing one set in Grace's file, one in Linda's tote bag, and one in my purse. Linda insisted on keeping her set at her house. "If someone gets into your place again," she said, "they won't get all the proof." Hearing that should have frightened me. Instead, it made me grateful. On the drive home, Linda stopped at a hardware store and bought a small camera for my front door, ignoring my protest that she did not need to spend money on me. Her nephew came by again that afternoon and installed it. He also checked the windows, the back porch latch, and the basement door. By evening, my house felt different. Not untouched. It would never feel untouched again. But defended. I walked room to room after everyone left. In the living room, I straightened the photo of Robert and Lauren by the maple tree. In the hallway, I closed the desk drawer that had been left open. In the kitchen, I placed Grace's letter to Lauren and Mark beside my phone. Then I did something I had not done in years. I took a blank sheet of stationery and wrote a note to myself. "Tiffany, you are not being cruel. You are being clear." I taped it inside the kitchen cabinet where I kept my coffee mugs, because I knew the next time Lauren cried, or Mark accused, or my own guilt rose up, I would need to see it. That night, Lauren sent one text. "Mom, you're taking this too far." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, "No, Lauren, I am finally taking myself seriously." I did not wait for her reply. I turned off the phone, locked my new doors, and went to bed in the house Robert and I had built, not as a frightened old woman waiting to be moved, but as the legal owner, the living voice, and the only person who had the right to decide what happened next. The formal meeting took place 6 days later after banking hours in the same building where my daughter had called me Mom. This time, I did not enter through the front doors alone. Grace Mitchell walked beside me with a leather folder tucked under her arm. Linda came too, not as part of the legal discussion, but as my witness and my courage when mine threatened to slip. David Brooks had agreed to host the meeting in Conference Room 2, the same room where the first truth had cracked open. Janet Coleman was already there when we arrived, seated with a laptop and a neat stack of documents. I noticed the doors first. They were open when I walked in. I remembered the sound of them closing the week before. That small click that had changed everything. Back then, I had felt trapped between strangers and my own daughter. Now, stepping inside with Grace beside me, I felt something different. Not fearless. Ready. Lauren and Mark arrived 8 minutes late. Lauren came in first, wearing a dark blouse and no bank name badge. That absence struck me. I had seen her identity wrapped around that badge for so long. Professional, trusted, important. Without it, she looked smaller, like a woman who had dressed for a role she was no longer sure she could play. Mark followed behind her in a gray sport coat. His hair was perfect. His smile was not. "Tiffany," he said, as if we were meeting for Sunday dinner. I did not answer. Grace did. "Mr. Whitaker, please take a seat." His smile thinned. He looked at Grace, then at David, then at the documents on the table. For the first time since I had known him, Mark seemed to understand he was not the smartest person in the room. Lauren sat across from me. She did not look at Linda. She barely looked at Grace. Her eyes landed on me for 1 second, then dropped. I wanted to ask if she had slept. I wanted to ask if Ethan was all right. I wanted to ask a dozen mother questions that had no place in that room. Instead, I folded my hands on the table and waited. Grace began. "This meeting is not a family argument," she said. "It is a documented review of unauthorized financial and property-related actions involving my client, Tiffany Sanders." Mark gave a short laugh. "Unauthorized is a strong word." Grace turned to him. "Yes, that is why I chose it carefully." The laugh died. David sat at the head of the table, quiet but watchful. Janet's fingers rested near her keyboard. Linda sat against the wall with her purse in her lap, looking at Lauren with the kind of disappointment only a neighbor who watched a child grow up can carry. Grace placed the first document on the table. The bank letter regarding requested account profile changes. Then another. Customer profile maintenance request. Another. Online banking recovery update. Another. Authorized contact request. Each page landed with a soft sound, but to me, it felt like hearing locks turning. Grace continued. The bank's risk review identified signature inconsistencies. Mrs. Sanders states she did not authorize these changes. Cedar Falls Community Bank has frozen pending changes and preserved the records. Mark leaned back. "This sounds like bank procedure." Lauren was helping her mother navigate paperwork. I looked at him then. He spoke about me as if I were not sitting 3 feet away. Grace did not raise her voice. "Mrs. Sanders did not request that help. She's elderly," Mark said. "Families step in." Linda made a small sound under her breath, but Grace held up one finger without looking back. "Being elderly does not transfer legal authority," Grace said. Mark's jaw tightened. Lauren whispered, "Mark, stop." He ignored her. "You're making this adversarial when it didn't need to be." I heard my own voice before I planned to speak. It became adversarial when my name appeared on papers I did not sign. Lauren whispered, "Mark, stop." He ignored her. "You're making this adversarial when it didn't need to be." I heard my own voice before I planned to speak. It became adversarial when my name appeared on papers I did not sign. Everyone turned toward me. Mark's expression shifted into something smooth and pitying. "Tiffany, with respect, you may not remember every form you discussed with Lauren." "With respect," I said, and the words tasted bitter. Do not speak to me like I am furniture in my own life." Linda's eyes shone. Grace gave the smallest nod, then placed Lauren's internal banknote on the table. "Age-related confusion," Grace read aloud. "Daughter assists with financial organization. Recommend family contact be included to prevent missed notices." Lauren shut her eyes. Grace turned to her. "Did you enter this note?" Lauren's voice was faint. "Yes." "Did your mother consent to that description?" "No." "Did your mother request that you become the family contact?" "No." "Did you know the temporary authorization from 6 years ago had been revoked?" Lauren looked at me. Tears gathered, but she answered. "Yes." Mark turned toward her sharply. "Lauren." Grace caught that. So did David. "Mr. Whitaker," Grace said, "did you know the authorization had been revoked?" Mark's face hardened. "I'm not familiar with every document." That was not my question. I knew there had been changes after Robert died. "Did you advise Lauren to create a record of concern regarding her mother's capacity?" He laughed again, but this time it sounded forced. "I'm not a lawyer. I don't advise." Linda muttered. "You sure do talk enough to try." Grace ignored it. Mrs. Sanders found handwritten notes in her office. They included the phrases, "Mom-resistant emphasize safety stairs, concern, loneliness, concern, and Dr. Capacity." Lauren covered her mouth. Mark went still. Grace placed a copy of the notes on the table. "Whose handwriting is this, Mrs. Whitaker?" Lauren's shoulders trembled. "Mine. Were these notes related to persuading your mother to leave her home?" I was trying to organize my thoughts. "For what purpose?" Lauren looked at me, and for the first time, her voice broke without sounding rehearsed. "To convince you to consider assisted living." I felt the words enter me slowly. Even after the brochure, the realtor call the missing deed folder, hearing her say it aloud was different. "To convince me," I said, "or to prepare other people to believe I had already agreed?" She cried silently. Mark leaned forward. "This is ridiculous. Assisted living is not abuse. It's planning. The woman lives alone in a 2-story house." "The woman has a name," I said. He looked at me. "Tiffany Sanders," I continued. "Use it if you are going to discuss removing me from my home." Grace placed the Ashley Bennett real estate page down next. Scheduled valuation consultation. Property 214 Maple Ridge Lane. Owner status transitioning to assisted living. Mark's nostrils flared. Grace looked at him. "Did you or Lauren tell Ashley Bennett that Tiffany Sanders was transitioning to assisted living?" Mark said nothing. Lauren whispered, "I did, with Mr. Whitaker's knowledge." She hesitated. Mark turned toward her. "Careful." That one word changed everything. Careful. Not because it was loud. It was not. But it carried a warning. It sounded like a man reminding his wife that their stories needed to match. Lauren looked at him, and something shifted in her face. For a moment, I saw the woman beneath the ambition. Tired, frightened, trapped. "Yes," she said. Mark stared at her. Lauren looked down, with his knowledge. Grace did not pause. "Did either of you have written authorization from Mrs. Sanders to contact a realtor about valuation, sale listing, or transition from the property?" "No," Lauren said. Mark said, "No sale was completed." Grace turned toward him. "That is because you were stopped before completion, not because you had authority." David spoke for the first time. "That distinction matters." Mark's face reddened. Grace opened the final section of her folder. "Now we will address motive." Mark's chair creaked as he shifted. Grace placed a printed summary on the table. "Mrs. Whitaker has admitted that Mr. Whitaker was facing significant debt from a failed real estate investment. Mrs. Sanders was told an amount approaching $200,000. Lauren began crying harder. Grace asked, "Is that amount accurate?" Mark said, "My finances are private." Grace's eyes sharpened. Not when you attempt to use my client's property as a solution. He leaned forward. The smoothness was gone now. Nobody used anything. We looked at possibilities. Families help each other. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Families ask, I said. They do not forge. They do not hide mail. They do not tell realtors an old woman is leaving her home before she knows she is being moved. Mark pointed one finger toward me. You are being manipulated by a lawyer and a nosy neighbor. Grace's voice cut cleanly through the room. Lower your hand. He froze. Grace continued. If you threaten or intimidate my client again, this meeting ends, and the next communication goes through the appropriate authorities. The room fell silent. Lauren whispered, Mark, please. He sat back, breathing hard. I looked at him and wondered how many times Lauren had heard that tone at home. I wondered how many choices had been hers, how many had been his, and how many had grown between them until wrong began to sound necessary. But I could not let that question save her from responsibility. Lauren had known. Lauren had submitted forms. Lauren had called me ma'am. Grace placed a final document in front of Lauren and Mark. This is a written undertaking. It states that both of you acknowledge you have no authority over Mrs. Sanders' bank accounts, property, legal documents, mail passwords, medical decisions, or residence. You will return any documents removed from her home. You will provide copies of all communications with Ashley Bennett or any other third party regarding Mrs. Sanders' property. You will not contact Mrs. Sanders directly regarding financial or property matters unless she initiates contact. You will pay any fees incurred to correct unauthorized actions. Mark snorted. And if we don't sign? Grace closed her folder. Then I advised Mrs. Sanders on escalation, including civil claims and referral of suspected forgery or financial exploitation to law enforcement and regulatory authorities. Lauren made a small sound, almost a gasp. Mom, she said. There it was again. That word pulled out when consequences arrived. I looked at her. You remembered I was your mother when you needed mercy, I said, but you forgot it when you had power. She broke then. Not gracefully, not prettily. She folded over herself and cried into her hands. For a moment, no one spoke. Mark looked angry, not concerned. That told me another truth. Lauren had betrayed me, but Mark had been using her too. I felt pity, but I did not let it become permission. Lauren lifted her head, face wet. I thought if I could fix things, nobody would have to know. Fix things for whom I asked. She looked at me, and the answer came out in a whisper. For us. I nodded slowly. And what about me? She had no answer. Grace slid a pen toward her. Lauren stared at it for a long time. Then she signed. Mark refused at first. He argued. He accused. He said the document made him look guilty. Grace told him it did not make him look anything. It simply recorded boundaries that already existed under law. In the end, he signed too. Not because he was sorry, because he was cornered. When the meeting ended, David gathered the bank documents for preservation. Janet confirmed the account restrictions. Grace placed the signed undertaking into her folder. Linda stood and came to my side without saying a word. Lauren remained seated. As I reached the door, she spoke. Mom, are you going to press charges? I turned back. The room held its breath. I don't know yet, I said honestly. Her face crumpled again. But I do know this, I continued. You will never again have access to my life just because you are my daughter. From now on, trust will not be assumed. It will be earned. Lauren looked down. Mark stared at the table. And I walked out of that closed room with my name, my house, and my voice still belonging to me. After the meeting at Cedar Falls Community Bank, my life did not become peaceful all at once. That is something people do not always understand about justice. They imagine it arrives like a judge's gavel, clean and final. But in real life, justice often comes with paperwork, sleepless nights, family silence, and a heart that still aches even after you win. Lauren was suspended from the bank 2 days after the meeting. David Brooks did not call me personally to tell me. He was too professional for that. But Cedar Falls was not a large town, and news has a way of finding its way through grocery aisles, church foyers, and quiet conversations between women who pretend they are only asking how you are feeling. I learned it from Linda, who heard it from her niece, who worked with someone whose daughter had a checking account at the bank. Suspended pending internal review, Linda said carefully, as if the phrase might bruise me. I was standing at my kitchen sink rinsing a teacup. The water kept running long after the cup was clean. I had known consequences were coming. Grace had warned me. David had warned Lauren. The signed undertaking had made things official. Still hearing that my daughter had been removed from the job she once stood so proudly in front of my kitchen wearing made something inside me fold over. I turned off the faucet. Ethan will hear about it, I said. Linda's face softened. Probably. He's only 12. I know. I gripped the edge of the sink. None of this is his fault. No, Linda said. But it isn't yours either. That was the sentence I had to keep learning. It isn't yours either. Guilt visited me every morning for the first few weeks. It came while I poured coffee. It came while I made the bed. It came when I passed Lauren's childhood picture in the hallway, the one where she was missing 2 front teeth and holding a blue ribbon from the county fair. Guilt sat down beside me and whispered, "A mother protects her child." But then I would open the cabinet where I had taped my note. "Tiffany, you are not being cruel. You are being clear." And I would read it until I could breathe again. Grace moved quickly. She updated my will, revised my financial powers of attorney, and prepared healthcare documents that named a trusted church friend as backup instead of Lauren. That was one of the hardest signatures of my life. Not because I doubted the decision, but because signing Lauren out of those roles felt like admitting something had died. Grace was gentle, but firm. "You are not removing her as your daughter," she told me. "You are removing her from authority. There is a difference, a painful one." I established a small protected fund for Ethan, with Grace's office acting as part of the oversight and clear instructions that Lauren and Mark could not touch it. I did not want my grandson punished for the sins of frightened, greedy adults. Ethan had always loved me in the uncomplicated way children love before money teaches people to measure each other. One evening, about 3 weeks after the bank meeting, he called me. "Grandma," he said. His voice was small. "Hi, sweetheart. Are you mad at Mom?" I closed my eyes. There are questions children ask that adults spend years trying to answer without causing more harm. "I am hurt by some choices your mother made," I said carefully. "But I love her, and I love you very much." Dad left. The words hit me hard. "What do you mean, honey?" "He's staying somewhere else." "Mom said it's temporary, but they were fighting." She cried in the laundry room. I sat down slowly. Mark had left. Part of me felt satisfaction, and I was ashamed of it. Part of me felt sorrow for Lauren, and I was angry at that. Families can make a woman hold too many emotions in one body. "Ethan," I said softly, "grown-up problems are not your fault." "I know." But he did not sound like he knew. I wanted to drive over and bring him home with me. I wanted to make grilled cheese sandwiches put an old movie on television, and let him fall asleep under the quilt Robert's mother made. But Grace had told me to be careful about boundaries while matters were unresolved. So I did the next best thing. "You can call me anytime," I said. "No matter what happens between the adults, you are my grandson. That never changes." He was quiet for a moment. "Can I still come over sometimes?" My throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart, with arrangements that keep everything peaceful. But yes, when we hung up, I cried again. Not the broken, shocked crying from the day I found the realtor papers. This was softer. Grief mixed with love. The kind of crying that comes when you realize healing will not restore the past. It will only make a place for the future. Mark's departure did not surprise Grace. "Pressure exposes alliances," she said. "When the plan fails, people blame whoever is nearest." Lauren called less after that. At first, she had called constantly. Then came angry texts, then pleading ones, then silence. Grace handled all messages related to the house, the bank, and the documents. Lauren returned the missing deed folder through Grace's office in a plain envelope. No note, no apology, just the folder slightly bent at one corner. I held it when Grace gave it back to me. It was strange how ordinary it looked. Just paper. But paper can be a wall, a weapon, or a shield depending on whose hands hold it. I placed the deed folder in a fireproof lockbox Grace recommended, along with my willpower of attorney insurance papers and Robert's protection memo. Linda drove me to buy the box at an office supply store. She insisted we stop for lunch afterward, as if securing legal documents was just another errand two widows might do on a Tuesday. That was one of the ways she helped me heal. She made survival feel ordinary. The house began to feel like mine again, slowly. I changed the curtains in the kitchen. I planted lavender near the porch steps. I hired a young man from church to fix the loose railing Robert had always meant to repair properly. I placed a new brass plate on the mailbox. Tiffany Sanders, just my name. Not because Robert no longer mattered. He mattered in every board, every tree, every corner. But I needed to see my own name there, bright and unapologetic, every time I came home. The first time I drove back to Cedar Falls Community Bank, after everything, I sat in the parking lot for almost 10 minutes before going inside. My hands were on the steering wheel. My heart beat too fast. Memories came back without permission. Lauren behind the counter. The word, "Ma'am." David saying, "Close the doors." Janet sliding forms across the table, my false signature staring up at me. I almost drove away. Then I looked at my new bank folder on the passenger seat with my papers organized in plastic sleeves. I heard Robert's voice in my mind. "You give too much of yourself away." I whispered back, "Not today." Inside, the lobby was quiet. A teller I did not know greeted me. Lauren's station was empty, and I felt the absence like a missing tooth. Strange, sore, impossible not to notice. David Brooks came out from his office when he saw me. "Good morning, Mrs. Sanders," he said. Mrs. Sanders. Not ma'am in that cold, dismissive way. Not honey, not sweetheart, not a problem. My name spoken with respect. "Good morning, Mr. Brooks." He helped me review the updated protections. Everything was in place. My statements were mailed to my home. My phone number was mine. My accounts required direct verification. No pending profile changes remained. When he asked me to sign the confirmation page, I did not rush. I wrote slowly. Tiffany Sanders. The T had its little hat. The S ended exactly where I wanted it to. David glanced at the signature and smiled faintly. "Looks clear to me," I smiled back. "It is." After the bank, I went to church for the Wednesday senior luncheon for the first time in months. I had avoided people because I did not want questions, pity, or whispers. But isolation had become one of the tools that made me vulnerable. Lauren had used my loneliness against me. I decided I would not help her by staying alone. The ladies at church welcomed me without pressing too hard. Mrs. Alvarez saved me a seat. Ruth Miller asked if I still made lemon pound cake. Someone complained about the price of eggs. Someone else showed pictures of a new great-grandbaby. Ordinary talk. Beautiful, healing, ordinary talk. A week later, I joined the volunteer group that packed weekend meals for school children. My back ached after 2 hours, but my spirit felt lighter. Helping by choice felt different from being used. Giving from strength felt different from being drained. One afternoon, I found an old voicemail from Robert while cleaning out my phone. I do not know how I had missed it for so long. His voice was weaker than I remembered, but still him. "Hey, Tiff, just reminding you I love you. And don't let anybody rush you into signing anything, not even me." I sat on the edge of the bed and laughed through tears. Even from a voicemail, Robert knew how to make a point. By then, Lauren had begun leaving shorter messages. No demands, no accusations. Just one sentence here and there. "Mom, I hope you're okay. Mom. Ethan asked about you. Mom, I know I hurt you." I did not answer right away. Some people think forgiveness means opening the door the moment someone knocks. But I had learned doors need locks for a reason. A locked door is not hatred. Sometimes it is wisdom giving your heart time to ask whether the person outside has truly changed or simply wants back in. 1 month after the meeting, Grace called. Lauren's attorney reached out, she said. "My daughter has an attorney." "Yes, and that may actually be a good sign. It means communication can be structured." "What does she want?" Grace paused. "She wants to apologize in person. No discussion of money, property, or bank matters. Just a personal conversation. Only if you are willing." I looked out the kitchen window at the maple tree. The leaves had turned gold at the edges. I thought of Lauren at 5, laughing on Robert's shoulders. Lauren at 22 in her first blazer. Lauren in the bank lobby calling me ma'am. Lauren in the conference room signing away authority she should never have tried to take. Love and pain stood side by side inside me. "I'm not ready," I said. Grace's voice was warm. "Then that is your answer." So I waited, not to punish her, to listen to myself. And in that waiting, I discovered something I wish I had known sooner. Peace is not the absence of family conflict. Peace is knowing you no longer have to abandon yourself to keep the family quiet. I did not know yet whether Lauren and I could ever rebuild what had been broken. But I knew the terms had changed. I was still her mother, but I was no longer available to be erased. 3 months passed before I agreed to see Lauren alone. Not truly alone. Grace knew the meeting was happening. Linda knew too. The front door camera was working. My phone was charged, and I had promised myself that if the conversation turned toward money, property, guilt, or pressure, I would end it immediately. That may sound cold to someone who has never had to protect herself from her own child. To me, it sounded like wisdom. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when Lauren came to my house. The sky was gray, and water ran in thin streams down the porch steps Robert had built with his own hands. I watched her through the front window as she parked at the curb. She sat in the car for nearly 5 minutes before getting out. That gave me time to see her clearly. She was not wearing a blazer, no bank badge, no polished heels. Her hair was pulled back loosely, and her face looked tired in a way makeup could not hide. She carried no folder, no purse full of papers, no envelope that might become another demand. Just herself. When she reached the porch, she paused beneath the awning and looked at the new brass plate on my mailbox. Tiffany Sanders. I saw her read it. I saw her swallow. Then she knocked. For most of my life, I would have opened the door before the second knock. Mothers do that. We hear our child outside, and every boundary becomes a curtain in the wind. This time, I waited. Not to be cruel. To remind myself that I had a choice. When I opened the door, I kept the storm door closed between us. Lauren's eyes filled instantly. "Hi, Mom," she said. The word hit me in a place still tender. "Hello, Lauren." She looked down at the wet porch boards. "Thank you for letting me come." "I agreed to talk," I said. "That's all." She nodded quickly. "I know." For a moment, we just stood there separated by glass rain history, and everything neither of us knew how to repair. Then she said, "I'm not here to ask for anything." I did not answer. "I'm not here about the bank, or the house, or the documents." Her voice shook. "I'm not here to ask you to change anything with Grace." "That's good," I said. She flinched, but she accepted it. "I came because I need to say something without Mark, without lawyers, without anyone else in the room." At Mark's name, I studied her face. "How is Ethan?" Her mouth trembled. "He misses you." "I miss him too. He's been asking when he can come over for cookies again." Despite everything, a small ache of warmth moved through me. "He can come Saturday if Grace says the arrangement is clear." Lauren nodded. "I'll make sure it is." That was new. No argument, no sigh, no little correction about how I was making things complicated. Just acceptance. I opened the storm door. "Come in." She stepped inside slowly, as if entering a house she no longer had the right to assume would welcome her. Her eyes moved around the hallway, pausing on the family photos, the new lock, the small camera monitor near the table. Shame crossed her face with each reminder. In the kitchen, I made tea because I needed something to do with my hands. Lauren sat at the table where she had once pointed to papers after Robert died and told me signing would make everything easier. I placed a cup in front of her. She stared at it. "I don't deserve this," she whispered. "No," I said. "But I made it anyway." She let out a broken breath. Then slowly she began. "I treated you like you were already gone," she said. I stood by the counter, one hand resting on the edge. Lauren looked at me through tears. "That's what I did. I talked about your house like you weren't still living in it. I talked about your money like it was waiting for the family to need it. I talked about your age like it gave me the right to decide for you." I did not interrupt. "I told myself I was scared," she continued, "and I was. Mark's debt was worse than I admitted. He kept saying we would lose everything. He kept saying you had more than enough, that you were sitting on value you didn't need, that families were supposed to help each other." Her voice cracked. But I chose to believe him because it benefited me too. That sentence mattered, not because it fixed anything, but because it was the first sentence that did not hide behind protection, fear, or family. Lauren wiped her face. "I wanted the problem to disappear. I wanted to keep my house, my marriage, my image, my job. And somehow, I convinced myself that your security was less important than mine." I sat down across from her. The kitchen felt very still. "What hurt the most," I said, "was not the paperwork." She closed her eyes. "It was the bank," she whispered. "Yes, I know." "No," I said gently. "You need to hear it. You looked at me in front of strangers and chose not to know me." A sob moved through her. "I was afraid if they knew you were my mother, they'd look closer. And they should have." She nodded, crying harder now. "I know." I looked at her hands. They were bare except for a thin silver band on her right hand. Her wedding ring was gone. "Mark," I asked. "We're separated," she said. He blamed me for signing the undertaking. Then he blamed me for losing access to the bank. Then he blamed me for not getting you to drop everything. She gave a sad, humorless laugh. It turns out I was useful to him the same way I tried to make you useful to me. That was a hard truth, and I could see it had cost her something to say it. "I'm sorry for that," I said. She looked up surprised. I continued. "But being hurt by Mark does not erase what you did to me. I know." She nodded quickly. "I know, Mom. I'm not asking it to Mom." This time, the word did not sound like a tool. It sounded like a plea with no guarantee attached. Lauren reached into her coat pocket and I stiffened. She noticed and stopped immediately. "It's just a letter," she said. "You don't have to take it." "What kind of letter?" "An apology. Written. So you have it when I leave, so I can't twist it later." That sentence made my throat tighten. I held out my hand. She gave me the envelope. On the front in Lauren's handwriting were 2 words, "For Mom." I did not open it yet. Lauren looked around the kitchen at Robert's chair at the mug rack at the old rooster clock above the stove. "I miss Dad," she whispered. "So do I." I think he saw me more clearly than I wanted to be seen. I followed her gaze to Robert's chair. "He saw all of us clearly," I said, "including me." Lauren looked at me. "What do you mean?" "I gave too much. I made it easy for people to confuse my love with permission." Her face folded with grief. "I did that. Yes," I said. "You did. The honesty hurt both of us, but it did not destroy us." That gave me a small kind of hope. Lauren took a shaky breath. "Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at my daughter, my little girl, my betrayer, my wounded child, my adult daughter who had made choices with consequences. And I understood that forgiveness was not a door you fling open. It was a road, sometimes long, sometimes narrow, sometimes full of signs that said, "Go slow." "I don't know," I said. She nodded, crying silently. "But I am willing to see who you become next." Her eyes lifted. "That is not the same as trusting you," I said. "You will not have access to my accounts. You will not have keys to this house. You will not speak for me. You will not handle my mail documents, passwords, doctors, or decisions. If we rebuild anything, it will be through honesty, respect, and time." "I understand." "And Lauren, yes, if you ever try to make me feel guilty for protecting myself, this door closes again." She swallowed. "I won't." I believed that she meant it in that moment. I also knew meaning it once was not enough. After tea, she stood to leave. At the door, she hesitated, then looked at me like a child asking permission to step closer. I did not hug her, not yet, but I touched her hand. It was small, brief, and real. She cried all the way down the porch steps. The following Saturday, Ethan came over. We baked cookies, watched an old movie, and he fell asleep on the couch under Robert's mother's quilt. Lauren picked him up at 6. She stayed on the porch. She did not ask to come in. She simply thanked me and told Ethan to hug his grandmother. That mattered too. Healing came in small things after that. Clear boundaries, short visits, honest words. No papers on the table. No soft manipulation disguised as concern. One bright morning, months later, I walked into Cedar Falls Community Bank again. David Brooks greeted me from across the lobby. "Good morning, Mrs. Sanders." I smiled. "Good morning." At the counter, I signed a simple form to renew a certificate of deposit. My hand did not shake. Tiffany Sanders. My name looked strong. As I stepped outside, sunlight hit the sidewalk, and I paused beneath the flag, breathing in the cool Ohio air. I still loved my daughter. I still missed what we had lost. I still carried scars from the day she made me a stranger in front of everyone. But I was no longer a stranger to myself. And that was the victory Robert had wanted for me all along. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were in Tiffany's place. I'd also love to know where you're watching from and what time it is there, because somewhere, someone else may need to hear that love should never cost a woman her dignity.